Today we are going to see. What if Dean Winchester had to give up his daughter to save her? Part 3. So let's get started. Sam looked up from his primary source documents scattered about the table in the crow's nest when he heard his brother and niece enter the bunker. Hey, Alex, he called. Hey, Uncle Sam. She sounded far less enthused than he. How was school? Sam asked. Lousy, replied Alex, dropping her backpack out of the way by the side of the stairs she had just descended. Oh, I'm sorry, said Sam. What happened? Do you want to talk about it? Alex came over to where her uncle sat and plopped into the chair next to him. My school's having a mother-daughter dance next month, said Alex. I mean, that sounds like fun, said Sam lightly. Why does that make you? Oh, kind of a bummer, yeah, Alex got the words out for him. I'm sorry, Alex, said Sam sympathetically. Yeah, said Dean, leaning on the opposite side of the table. Alex, and I had a talk on the way home about her mom and Ben. Sam, she didn't know they had passed. What? Sam responded with disbelief. He had to think for a moment before he made the same realization Dean had a half an hour ago. His expression morphed into shock. Oh shoot, he caught himself, glancing over at Alex. All she did was give a tiny, half-hearted giggle without even parting her lips. You would have been too young to remember anything we told you. And we haven't mentioned it since. Wow, epic fail on our part. It's okay, Alex shrugged, bland and sad but perfectly honest. How are you holding up? Sam asked. Not too bad, replied Alex. For some reason I just really want to see Matt. Yeah, I'm gonna make that call now, said Dean, coming off the table and pulling out his phone. Are we making a social visit? Sam asked his brother. Oh yeah, replied Dean, searching for Laura's number. It has been a really long time, said Sam, turning back to Alex. We probably should have gone to see him sooner. Alex shrugged again. I was super busy with school anyway. Yeah, well, still, said Sam. We're doing it now, said Dean. That's what matters. He glanced up at Sam as he turned to walk away. And although he gave a confident nod to accent his statement, the look on his face denoted the shame he was trying to ignore. Sam heaved a sigh and rubbed at his temple. He was starting to feel a heaviness sinking on top of him. He knew immediately it was the same guilt his brother felt, but it took him a moment to realize it was also fear. Alex had been back with them for a total of 7 months. And in that time it had felt as if their entire life had been flipped upside down, but simultaneously like this was exactly how it was always supposed to be. Things had been going so well considering the circumstances, but the undercurrent of how the hell to raise a now 10-year-old had kept the brothers slightly on edge. And this moment had Sam feeling that anxiety intensify 100-fold. 7 months and neither of them had thought to mention that her mother and half-brother were dead. They were failing her already. Was this going to be the trend? Were they completely incapable of supporting her the way she would need to be supported as she went through adolescence? Through puberty, through her teenage years. Dear God, Sam thought. He felt slightly nauseous from the overwhelm as his brain ran off into the future at breakneck speed. And then it got worse when yet another horrifying thought came to him. You didn't even know Ben existed, did you? He asked his niece. Alex shook her head, looking neither upset nor happy, which she may have instinctually known would lessen the blow for her uncle. Sam closed his eyes slowly and shook his own head. Alex, I am so sorry, he said. It's okay, said Alex, sounding the tiniest bit exasperated at having to say this again. I wouldn't want to talk about it either. Don't let that stop you, Sam implored, leaning toward her. Ask us absolutely anything about them. Anytime. Your dad and I will be an open book. Alex smiled and nodded. "'Kay, I will." Sam sat in patient silence, watching her expectantly. Alex sat quietly as well until she came to the conclusion that he was waiting for her questions. Well, not right now, she amended her previous statement. Oh, said Sam, suddenly realizing how intensely he had been staring. Alex laughed a little. No, Dad told me lots of stuff about Mom and Ben in the car. But I'm sure I'll think of questions later. Well, when you come up with them, yell them out, said Sam, smiling anxiously. Okay, said Alex. She sighed. I just wish I knew what they looked like is all. We don't even have pictures of them. Dad said we lost them all in the fire. Sam nodded solemnly. Your dad lost pretty much everything when that happened. Everything except you, me, and the Impala. Sounds horrible, said Alex. Yeah, that was a bad day, agreed Sam, looking off into the middle distance. What did he even do? she asked, looking perplexed, like she couldn't quite imagine what her father had been through. What do you do when you lose everything like that? Sam took a deep breath. Hold on to what you've got left. And that's what he did. Pretty much spent a couple months just taking care of you. He'd hole up in whatever hotel room we were renting out at the time, maybe run some errands. He didn't even drink or go to a bar or a restaurant to blow off steam. Refused to come hunting on the cases I came across and couldn't leave alone. And he refused an why offer of help with you for a long time, even when he was exhausted. I actually had it out with him at one point. Blank, underscore, blank. Sam sat at a table in the motel room, opting to reference his laptop at this moment rather than the journals and documents spread out adjacent to the device. His brother was dead asleep in the bed on the opposite side of the room, passed out on top of the covers fully clothed. Alex was snoozing in her travel crib a short distance away. But not for long. She started to fuss, and then cry. Sam looked up at the sound of his niece's protests. Just in time to see Dean leap off the bed as if lit on fire. He strode the 3 short steps to the side of the crib and stumbled slightly, catching himself on the wood rail. He paused then collapsed on the floor. Whoa, Dean, Sam barked, jumping up and racing over. Hey, Dean, I'm fine, Dean grumbled as he came to even before Sam could fully kneel down beside him, hauling himself to his feet. Sam tried to help him up. But the elder shook him off. Just a head rush. A head rush, Sam repeated skeptically. A head rush so bad you passed out? Yeah, was all Dean bothered to say in response. He was already hunched over the crib to pull his bawling daughter to his shoulder. Hey, baby girl, what's got you all worked up? He bounced her, his eyes barely staying open. Here, said Sam, reaching for his niece. Let me get her settled. You need to rest. Dean pulled away, saying, No, I've got it. Dean, you're exhausted, Sam insisted. Just let me help. I'm fine, Sam, snapped Dean in reply. No, you're not, Sam argued. What, do you not want me taking care of her? You weren't interested in taking care of her 6 months ago, Dean mumbled snidely. What? Sam asked, caught off guard by this comment. Do you mean when I left to go clean up my mess from being soulless? Dean, I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to protect you and your family by leaving. I know. Dean wagged his head to the side. That's not it, I don't know why I brought that up. It doesn't even bother me, I know what you were trying to do. I'm just a little out of it, okay. Don't know what I'm saying. Okay, well, if it's not that, then what is it? Snapped Sam. Why are you shutting me out like this? You won't even let me hold her. Do you not trust me with her? No, that's not. Dean shook his head again, frustrated but too tired to finish his sentence. Then let me help, yelled Sam. I don't want your help. Why, Dean, I have to do this, Sam. I have to, shouted Dean. It's all I know how to do right now. Taking care of her is the only thing keeping me from spending the rest of my life in a drunken stupor. If I hand her off, God knows if I'll ever even see the light of day again. I have to do this, Sam. She's all I've got left. Slowly, Sam deflated, his anger fading as he watched his brother look down at his daughter, cradling her tiny head and thumbing the tears off her cheek. She was still upset, but slowly starting to calm as her father comforted her. Okay, I get it, said Sam gently. As much as I can get it, I get it. And I am so glad. This is how you're dealing with everything that's happened. But Dean, you're wrong. Dean was too drained to get angry again, so he rolled his eyes over and fixed his younger brother with an exasperated stare, asking, Oh, am I? She's not all you've got left, because you still have me, too, said Sam. If focusing on caring for your daughter keeps you sane, great, absolutely, do that. But, on those days, even just moments when you're run down to the point where you leap out of a coma so fast you pass out 2 seconds later, I can help, Dean. When it gets to be too much, I'm here. Dean ooked on the verge of tears at his Sam's words, but slowly, he simply turned his gaze toward the empty space between them. He was too worn out to cry. I am kind of tired, he finally admitted. He looked at Alex, who was still red-faced and leaky-eyed, but no longer vocal about it. I'm really tired. I know, said Sam quietly. Dean hesitated for a few seconds longer, then finally turned and moved toward his brother. Okay, replied Sam, trying to keep his excitement and sudden zip of anxiety from showing so as not to spook Dean and have him reverse his decision. Carefully, he head out and took his niece as his brother handed her over. Dean didn't lower his arms once he released her, as if relaxing was tempting fate, and he watched his daughter with intense caution as Sam settled her in his grasp. His nervousness appeared to peak as Alex began to fuss again at the change of hands, her tears renewed and her expression more distressed. She didn't outright bawl, however. "Hey, Alex," said Sam. His tone light and happy, not only in an attempt to calm her but to convince himself that he would be able to look after her by himself for the first time in ever. There had actually been very few instances when he had been alone with her, and never had he been wholly responsible for her, not even for a minute. Taking over to give Dean a break was undoubtedly what he wanted to do. But now it was actually happening, he was just a little bit terrified. But he wouldn't let either of them get the slightest hint of that. "Hey, it's okay," he continued his attempts to reassure Alex. She looked him full in the face and he got the sense she was on the edge of losing her shit altogether. So Sam gave her the kindest smile he could muster without looking deranged. "It confu," said her just enough to pause the impending doom. Then he took a gamble and tickled her pudgy little cheek with his index finger. She let out a squeaky laugh and whatever sorrow she had been struggling with was immediately forgotten. From what Sam could see, it appeared as if every muscle in Dean's body relaxed, his arms falling to his sides. "Well, all right, then," he said, looking incredibly relieved. "Yeah," said Sam, also incredibly relieved but only letting it show his happiness. "I think we've got this." "Cool," said Dean. "I guess He looked around, suddenly unsure what he was going to do with himself. "Go back to sleep. You need it, Dean," Sam reinforced his decision. "Go crash." "Okay," Dean said with a shrug and a disbelieving shake of his head. He began to meander back to his bed, stopping only to turn and gesture pointedly. "You wake me if you have any questions." Sam gave a small laugh. "Okay, I will. I mean it, Sam, anything," Dean implored as he sat on the edge of the bed. "Cross my heart," Sam insisted, "and she probably won't go down right away, you might have to hang out for a while." Dean couldn't seem to stop instructing even as he was lying down. Quote, "Her diaper's dry and that wasn't her hungry cry, so she probably had a nightmare and that usually keeps her awake longer. What do I have to do to get you to go down?" Sam teased. All right," said Dean, finally settling into a comfortable spot and closing his eyes. Seriously, any questions? But even as he gave this one last plea he began to drift off. Sam smiled at his brother's sleeping form before turning away to wander the room with his niece. "Your dad loves you so much," he told her. "Sometimes we need to remind him to take care of himself, too. So once in a while you're going to have to put up with me for a bit. But that's okay, because I love you, too. And he doesn't get to have all the fun." "Well," Sam sighed, looking around the small suite they occupied, "what do you want to do, baby girl?" Alex gave a tiny MMPH of disapproval and looked at her uncle, her brow furrowed with concern. Sam grimaced in agreement. "Yeah, that felt weird. I think I'll stick to Alex, for now." Seemingly satisfied with this decision and therefore completely forgetting it had been an issue at all, she plopped her head down on his shoulder and gripped a tiny wad of his shirt. Sam had to chuckle quietly at this sudden displacement of her body mass, and an instinct he didn't know he had made him cradle her head with his spare hand. He got the inkling then that it wasn't Saint the need for something important to do that had Dean constantly caring for his daughter. Holding her was like getting a really long hug with no ulterior motive, meaning, or emotionally tumultuous cause driving it. Giving her comfort meant getting comfort back even though she didn't know what she was doing. And this mutual support was all the three of them had to survive on. Sam was grateful he was now a part of that. Alex turned her head slightly without lifting it, and released Sam's shirt to point at the table where his research languished in disarray. "Does that look interesting to you?" he asked. "I guess that makes sense. Lots of stuff going on over there, I'd be curious, too." "Come on, I'll show ya, blank. Sam had paused in his commentary at the split-second flash of a memory. And when he looked back at his niece she had dropped her gaze and her expression had grown truly solemn. "I know it's hard finding out they're gone," Sam said, "but your dad and I are still here. As much as we can be. We'll just hold on to each other." "K." Alex nodded as a tear fell from her eye, which she wiped away hastily. Seeing her still spiraling in her thoughts. Unable to pull out of the nosedive, Sam reached out and tickled her wet cheek. In spite of any effort she made to remain in her despair, she scrunched up and shied away with a high-pitched, musical giggle. "See," he said, "still here. She smiled and nodded again, but this time it seemed like she heard him. Uncle Sam, could you take me to the dance? She asked. What, me? Sam said with surprise. Ooh, I don't know. Am I allowed if I'm not your mom? I don't know, Alex shrugged. Dad said you were kind of like a girl because of the long hair. Sam rolled his eyes and let a small smile onto his face. Yeah, that sounds like something he'd say. I'm not sure, Alex. I might look pretty out of place. You could wear a dress, Alex suggested. No, replied Sam. Why not? Well, for one, it's not really my style. And for another, I don't think they have my size just hanging on the rack. I'd have to make one or something, Sam elaborated, taking a moment to stare into the distance and consider the logistics of acquiring a dress that would fit him properly. He pulled himself back to the present and compromised. Tell you what, I'll wear a nice suit. So you are taking me? Alex was suddenly more animated than she had been all day. Sam grinned at realizing the verbal corner he'd backed himself into. Let me check with the school first to make sure I'm not flying in the face of all the moms, but yeah. I'll take you. Yes, thank you, Uncle Sam. Alex shouted, and bounced off her chair and threw her arms around her uncle's neck. Sam chuckled and hugged her back, pleased to see her suddenly so happy. And he was glad he could be the one to cheer her up this much, and honored to be the stand-in for Lisa, but he also wished he didn't have to be. She didn't even know what her mother looked like. Then something surfaced in Sam's mind, vague and buried, a memory so small and brief that it had been forgotten almost as soon as it occurred. It was little more than a few seconds out of an entire day of momentous events. Hang on a sec, Sam said, pulling away from Alex. He retrieved his phone from where it lay on the table, opened his photos, and began to scroll. Up and up and up. Dear God, he had a lot of photos. And most of them were from cases. Why did he still have these? Only a minute fraction remained relevant. He began to swipe emphatically. Maybe it's at the very top until he hit the end of his camera roll. And there it was. He chuffed in disbelief and smiled. Oh my God, I still have it, he said. It must have transferred from my first smartphone. Okay. He looked back at his niece. The quality is terrible. This was early days of camera phones, but this is the one photo I took with my phone the day you were born. Alex's eyes went wide as shish. He immediately struggled to bottle up her feelings, as if the prospect of what she was about to see was too exciting to even dare to hope. Nonetheless, she pivoted around to stand at her uncle's shoulder. He rotated his phone sideways and held it out for her to view. It was indeed horribly grainy, and the exposure and white balance were significantly off, but it did nothing to demerit the content of the image. It showed the inside of a hospital room. The picture was taken perpendicular to the bed, where Lisa lay with the back propped up. Her head was turned so her expression was clearly visible. She was alight with a broad smile as she chatted with the nurse checking her IV and vitals. In her arms she cradled a bundle of fabric that was a swaddled newborn Alex. Just visible on the other side of the bed was Dean, passed out sitting up on the available couch with his head resting against the wall. Similarly unconscious at his side was Ben, slouched onto Dean's shoulder as he slept. That's, Alex asked quietly. Positively awestruck, that's them. Yeah, said Sam. That's your whole family. Alex couldn't speak for a second as she studied the image. Dad's right, she said finally, smiling. She is really pretty. Sam glanced at his niece at this comment, feeling a surge of sympathy for his brother and the love he'd lost. Yeah, she was a really lovely person in a lot of ways. Really independent and free-spirited. And kind. And she took such good care of you. And Ben. And your dad, even. He released a little laugh. That's Ben, Alex asked, pointing at the young man in the picture. Yeah, that's your half-brother, replied Sam. He looks like Dad, she commented. They had a lot in common, agreed Sam. They were pretty much father and son by the end. Alex looked sad again for a moment, but decided not to dwell. I'm surprised Mom isn't more tired than Dad and Ben. Well, at this point she'd already slept pretty hard for a while, said Sam. Dean and Ben and I all stayed up a bit longer to help with you and the doctors and nurses coming and going while your mom rested up. This was a kind of changing of the guard moment. Alex giggled at the comment, making Sam smile. It was then that Sam heard his brother sigh across the room. Well, okay, I'm so sorry, Laura. Yeah, you, too. Then he hung up and rubbed at his forehead. Concerned, Sam handed his phone to Alex, saying, Here. I'll be right back. He crossed to where Dean stood, staring solemnly at the now black screen. What's up? Asked Sam. Dean shook his head and said in an undertone, Matt's a milk carton kid. What? Sam breathed. Since when? Around Thanksgiving, replied Dean. Apparently he ran away one night, and they couldn't find him, and they've been looking ever since. Betrayal went cold pretty quick. Oh, God, Sam sighed. Poor Alex. I can't tell her this today, Sam, said Dean, fixing his brother with a distraught expression. I can't. She finds out her mother and her half-brother are dead. And then her adoptive brother is missing, probably dead, all in the span of an hour. It's her whole family gone all at once, except us. How is she supposed to handle all that? How can she ever recover? Sam paused as he mulled over the question, then decided he dared. You did. Dean paused, looking his brother up and down as he absorbed Sam's words. Then he gazed at his darkened phone and said, Did I? Sam nodded slowly. Yeah, you did, Dean. As soon as we got Alex back. These last few months I haven't seen you this happy, hell, even content, in years, because you've got her. Okay, her mother and brothers are gone, but to deal with that, what she needs is you. You're her family, and you know exactly how she feels right now, exactly what she's lost, and that's got to count for a lot. Dean had been staring down his brother, trying to keep his expression empty and failing. He couldn't shake the point Sam was making. So he sighed and grumbled, God, I hate it when you're right. Okay, time to face the music, I guess. He turned and headed over to where Alex stood with her elbows on the table, still holding her uncle's phone. Before he could even prompt Alex for the conversation, she turned. Her expression bright, and rose off the table. Dad, have you seen this picture? She asked exuberantly. Sam felt a sudden jolt of fear. Dean had no idea this image existed. Of course Sam hadn't even remembered it for over 10 years. How pissed would his brother be to find out it had been hiding in his phone all this time while he'd had nothing by which to remember his girlfriend and adoptive son? And how would he handle having the photo sprung on him out of the blue? Before Sam could mitigate the damage, Dean had leaned over to look at the screen as his daughter held it out for him. His expression went blank. If there was any emotion visible, it was shock. Sam blurted his triage. I forgot I took that. I didn't even know I still had it, but I decided to look and there it was. Dean didn't reply. Instead he took the phone from Alex's hands to view the image closer. He'd never thought he would ever lay eyes on either of them ever again. And this instance was a moment he didn't even remember. It was like having a new experience with them for the first time since they had died. But wait, he did remember this. He remembered waking up to find Ben on his shoulder. By that time Lisa was dozing in bed again. Alex returned to her plastic bassinet. Sam had drifted off at this point in the chair across the room, precisely the spot from which the photo was taken. Upon waking, Dean had roused Ben with a gentle shake of his shoulder, then crossed to Sam and brought him around as well, simply to instruct him to take Ben home to bed while he stayed with Lisa for the rest of the night. The memories from that day were so clear, it was almost superfluous to have a picture. And yet this photo made those recollections 1,000 times more real than without. All at once it brought the most overwhelming joy and the most agonizing pain. He sat down in one of the table chairs and leaned his elbows on his knees, never taking his eyes off Sam's phone. By now, the younger Winchester could see the grief creeping into his brother's expression. I'm sorry I didn't think of it sooner, said Sam quietly, trying to get ahead of the fallout. But Dean didn't snap at him. There wasn't room in his head or his heart to be angry right now. Instead he gestured lightly with the phone and glanced up at his younger brother and said, That's a good picture, Sam. As soon as he got the words out, tears poured out of his eyes. He didn't even have time to try to stop them, they formed too quickly and grew too large to withhold. And at that point he had to put Sam's phone down on the table and run his hand over his face. It wasn't wholly driven by the emotions the image had brought to the surface. Rather, it was the contrast between his reaction and his daughter's. Dean hadn't seen her this happy all day. The sight of her departed mother and brother was a joy for her. And while it was joy for him, too, it was also breaking his heart all over again. He could remember them, remember being around them, seeing them, hearing them, touching them, even their scent. He could tangibly remember all he had lost. Alex did not, but she did remember Matt. Of all the people on the planet, he was the one she had spent the most time with. No one else could compare, even Sam and Dean couldn't hold a candle. They had grown up together, even lost their parents together. And at the funeral, Matt had fought for his little sister to go home with people he thought would care for her better than anyone else, even though that meant he had no idea if he would ever see her again. How could he tell her Matt was gone? How could he make it so that if she ever saw a picture of her adoptive brother again, she would feel as if her chest had been flayed open and her heart scooped out with a dull spoon. The way Dean felt right now seeing Lisa and Ben. "Dean," Sam said sympathetically. But before he could make a move to comfort his brother, or even say another word, Alex had stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her father's neck, dropping her head onto his shoulder. Dean straightened at the contact, then returning the embrace, clutching her tightly to him. She was the most delicate thing, yet so substantial, so real. He lay a hand on the back of her head to hold her closer, shutting his eyes and tucking his face into her hair. It was getting so much darker in the last few years. Even the last few months, which was odd, but it made far more sense than her being blonde, since both Lisa and he had dark hair. And suddenly he couldn't believe how accurate Sam's words were. 7 months ago, seeing that picture would have ruined him. He would have broken things, yelled at Sam, gotten shit-faced drunk, then slept through most of the next day, and not just because of the hangover. Because 7 months ago, everyone in that picture would have been lost to him forever. But today his daughter was here with him, and a part of her was Lisa, and part of her was Ben, too. And to have her wordlessly come over and comfort him now was more than he could have ever hoped to have. And instead of pain he felt gratitude, and a great deal of love, both for her and from her. He resolved right then to be there to wipe every one of the tears she cried over this, even though he had never meant to do anything less. But now he knew that would be all she needed to get through her ordeal. "Thank you, baby girl," he said as he gently pulled away, laying a quick kiss on her head. "That helped a lot. Sit down, Alex. I'll tell you about the conversation I just had with your aunt." Alex took up the seat Sam had vacated earlier, sitting across from Dean. "Are we going to see Matt soon?" she asked, and her eagerness was dampened by having just witnessed her father's near break. "I'm afraid not," said Dean softly. "Why?" Alex sounded taken aback. "She won't letting us come over." "It's not about her not letting us," said Dean. "Listen, Alex. Back around Thanksgiving, Matt ran away from home. They went looking for him that night, but they weren't able to find him." Alex's brow furrowed and she squinted slightly, seemingly so confused she was almost angry. "What do you mean, they weren't able to find him?" she said. "They found him eventually, right? They couldn't find him that night, but they found him later, right?" Dean watched her sadly. "I'm sorry, baby girl, they didn't." Alex just stared at him for a while, her breathing even but heavy. "So she started. "He's missing," said Dean. "For a few months now." She stared again. It ate away at Dean. Sadness he had expected. But this was shock, denial, all trying to quell rage. "Well, we have to go look for him," she said firmly. Dean sighed. He wasn't sure how to handle this. Sam jumped to his aid. "It's really hard to find someone after they've been gone for more than 48 hours. A lot of the evidence disappears by then. The police will keep trying, but they're unlikely to be successful." "Okay, yeah, the police. But we're different, right?" said Alex. Dean couldn't suppress a bitter breath of a laugh. She was too damn smart. She'd only been living in the bunker for 7 months. And she was already picking up on the tools they had at their disposal. They'd barely gotten into teaching her lore. "We could, I don't know, is there a location spell?" she continued. "Can we summon him like a demon or an angel? Or maybe we summon a demon or an angel and one of them could go find him." Dean could tell she would just spiral after this and knew it was time to give her the hard truth to keep her from losing her mind. Or summoning a demon. Dear God, his 10-year-old daughter summoning a demon. "Okay, take it easy, nobody's summoning any demons," Dean said firmly, but not unkindly. "Why not?" Alex demanded. "Alex, even if we could find him, which is not a guarantee," he said, "it's probably not good news." Alex stared at him again. Hard. "You think he's dead?" she snapped. This was not going well. "Believe me, I don't want that to be the case, truly I don't," said Dean. "But when a kid goes missing for this long, the sad truth is there's not a lot of alternate endings to that story." She looked absolutely livid. "So he's gone," she said sharply. Dean watched her sadly. He knew the anger she felt, and hated that he had to be the one to boil it up in her. "I'm not going to put the final nail in his coffin. But yeah, Alex, he's probably gone." Alex's chin quivered in spite of her anger. "No, he can't be gone," she protested. "He can't be gone. He's my brother. He's always there when I need him. He can't be gone." "Alex," Dean tried to reassure her. Before he could reach out, however, she leapt off her chair and bolted to the hallway in the direction of her room. Dean stood and took a few steps to follow, but was too stunned to chase after her. And by the sound of her door slamming, he could tell she wouldn't have let him comfort her right that second anyway. He closed his eyes wearily and ran a hand over his mouth. Shit, Sam breathed, staring at the place where Alex had disappeared. What do we do now? Let her cool off, said Dean, resigned. Then whatever we can. God, I feel so bad for her, said Sam. Why did I tell you to tell her? You were right, this was too much. It was always going to be too much, said Dean. Didn't matter when she found out. It was always going to suck. At least it all sucks at once instead of over and over again. Sam huffed a sigh. I guess you have a point. It's going to be a long night for her. Thank God she doesn't have school in the morning. Oh, I think it's going to be a long weekend, said Dean as he ambled toward the hallway. Where are you going? Sam asked. To sit outside her room and wait for her to calm down, said Dean. And what if she won't let you in once she does? Asked Sam. Then I will break down her door. Sam yawned and scratched at the back of his head as he exited the bathroom. His route was clear in spite of the darkness. His regular 2 a.m. had him familiarized with the hallways to the point of easily navigating them blind. The lack of humming from the lights made it a sigh to hear a tearful sniffing in the direction of the main rooms of the bunker. He paused and turned, his brow furrowed as he listened. Then he let out a small sigh as he realized what he was hearing. He followed the sound. He found Alex sitting on the floor in the library, tucked in the corner made by the wall and a bookcase. She had pulled her knees up to her chest with her arms wrapped around them, and she was crying quietly. Quietly, but not gently. It didn't surprise Sam, given this had been much of her activities this whole weekend. It still made him sad to see. Hey, Alex, he said, coming over to sit down next to her. She jumped with a quick intake of breath as she heard his voice. Oh God, can you hear me from your bedroom? She said, distressed. Did I wake you? No, said Sam reassuringly. I was already up. I heard it from the hall. I'm sorry, said Alex, anxiously wiping her tear-stained face. Don't be. It's okay, said Sam. But why are you out here instead of in bed? I didn't want to wake Dad again, said Alex. I've kept him up 2 nights in a row now. Alex, you don't have to worry about that, said Sam. He doesn't mind. He's going to get sick of it sooner or later, said Alex. Then he'll yell at me. Sam scoffed laughter. Actually, he's more likely to yell at you for not telling him when you feel like crap. Oh, come on, said Alex, amused and disbelieving. It sounds like a joke. But it's not, Sam insisted. What woke you up? Alex glanced up at him, then looked back down at her knees. She stared for a long time, and even in the dark he could see the heaviness in her eyes. Nightmare, was all she said. About, Sam prompted her gently. Alex sighed, almost a little irritated. Matt, just Matt, Sam asked. Yeah, just Matt, said Alex. Then slowly, the thought of it seemed to expand to the point she couldn't contain it anymore. I saw him get into a van, she said, her voice tightening as her tears rolled again. In through the back sliding door. And it was so dark inside, you couldn't see anything in it. It was just black, and as soon as he got in, it was like it ate him. He just stood there, on nothing, in nothing, and why? Eldon yelled and he wouldn't even turn, like he couldn't hear or see at all. And I couldn't get him to come back out no matter how hard I tried, and I tried really hard. Alex began to sob by the end. Sam put an arm around her shoulders and pulled her in tights as she leaned into his torso, her knees flopping to the side to rest against his. Shish, hey, I know, he said. I know how that feels, I do. It's hard, it hurts. But you have Dad, countered Alex. You've always had Dad. Alex, I have lost my brother so many times, said Sam, and the sudden absence of breath in his words was caused by the weight of the memories. And yeah, he always seems to come back, but it's never been a guarantee. Every time he dies, it feels like the final time. And every time is entirely different in the worst way. But without fail, it's just how you described your dream. It's like he sinks into that blackness, that void. He can't hear me, can't talk to me. He's beyond all help, all hope, just gone. Even though his body's in my arms. And every time he is so still. You'd think I would be used to it by now, but I'm not. It's always like I'm the one who's been shot, or stabbed, or hexed, or whatever it was that got him this time around, like I died, too. You've lost your brother, Alex. It's going to take more than 2 nights to work through it. And that's okay. There's no time limit on your grief. Alex's chin quivered at her uncle's words as all the tears she had been trying and failing to hold back she finally let flow freely. She turned and buried her face against Sam's chest and Dee wrapped a spindly arm around his ribcage, clinging on. Sam returned her embrace, adding his free arm to encircle her. He held her as tight as he dared, feeling her pain as if it were his own, because it was his own. It had been his grief far too many times. They sat together for a long while on the library floor. Finally, Alex gathered herself enough to pose a question. How long did it take you to stop being sad when Dad died? Sam gave a short grimace, not wanting to answer the question. It wouldn't exactly be comforting. For one, Dean wasn't always dead long enough for Sam to even begin healing. The times he had sunk into horrible habits, gotten in trouble, found bitter, pessimistic ways of coping, and none of it really helped. If ever he could say he had started to feel better, it had taken months. He didn't want her to think she was facing months of emotional agony even if she was. So he settled for vagary. It really depended, Sam said. Sometimes it took a while. But it was different for me. A lot of the time, I was dealing with it alone. And it was too much to handle by myself, so I tried to bury it. Which just made it last that much longer. But you're not alone, Alex. So just lean on us. Okay, Alex nodded against his t-shirt as she tried to quiet her sobs. Do you want to go see your dad? He asked her knowingly. She nodded again. Okay, said Sam, releasing her to stand up. Here we go. Quote, freed of Sam's structural support, she pivoted back up to sit on her own, but she couldn't seem to bring herself to stand, instead covering her face with her hands. So Sam stooped down and scooped her up. She automatically put her arms around his neck and tucked her head over his shoulder. He toted her out of the library and down the hall to the bedrooms. Hey, Dean, his brother's bedroom door was already open. Was the elder Winchester's sleepy response. Somebody's having a rough night, said Sam, passing into the room, Alex still in his arms. All right, come here, said Dean. Sam deposited Alex on the bed next to her father, giving her shoulder a gentle farewell squeeze. From her back, she rolled onto her side to face Dean, curling into a tight, tiny ball atop the sheets. Still mostly asleep, Dean draped his arm over her, casual but protective, as she cried. I'm sorry, she wept. Don't you dare, said Dean quietly, rubbing her back. Don't you dare be sorry for this. It's okay, baby girl. Sam stopped at the door to look back on the two. It seemed so easy for Dean, not even half conscious, and he was still steadfast for his daughter. Like it was his most natural reflex. As if there hadn't been a 7-year gap in caring for her. And immediately Sam was taken back to that tiny motel room. Blank. Sam had returned to his research, inspecting a few scribbled notes on a piece of coffee-stained paper. He kept one hand wrapped around Alex's torso, suspending her somewhat above his thighs so she could use her legs a bit. When she pointed at something he explained it, keeping his voice soft so as not to rouse his sleeping brother, although he suspected it would take a cannon blast to do that. Dean emitted a snore on occasion. Sam quickly learned, however, it wasn't necessarily the volume of a noise that cued him to wakefulness. Alex started to fuss a little, producing a series of short, chirruping sobs. Sam snapped to attention, dropping the paper and turning his niece to face him, giving her a little bounce in an attempt to soothe whatever frustrated her. Hey, it's okay, he said reassuringly. Although he wasn't sure how honest his tone came across as nervousness stirred in the pit of his stomach. What's the matter? That's her hungry cry. Sam looked across the room to see Dia. Anne was laying in exactly the same spot and position, eyes shut and everything. Nonetheless, he spoke. She can have half a bottle at this time of night, he continued, moving nothing but his mouth. Okay, Sam responded and popped up from his seat at the table and headed toward the almost kitchenette to make up a bottle. If he was going to do this, he might as well do as he was told until he knew what to do when. But he'd seen Dean make a bottle about 1 billion times since the fire, so he knew the process very well. First get the bottle. Sam settled Alex into his left arm to free up his dominant hand for fine motor function. Alex still piped from her hunger, neither upset nor content as a spare tear tracked down her ruddy cheek. But her expression grew concerned as she watched her uncle struggle with the bottle. The cap was on, and for longer than he cared to admit he labored fruitlessly to unscrew it. He couldn't seem to figure out how to hold the bottle and at the same time twist the lid. Again, he'd seen Dean do this an ungodly amount of times, had Sam never noticed the actual techniques he used. Perhaps it was because the elder made it look so easy, the younger hadn't thought there was any technique to study. Clearly this was incorrect, but eventually, thankfully, he managed to uncap the bottle. Okay, hard part's over, Sam thought. Wrong again. He grabbed the container of formula and almost fumbled it all over the floor. He somehow kept from jostling Alex over much as he jumped to catch the canister. Sorry, he whispered to her. She seemed unperturbed, or at least, no more perturbed than she already was. Need help, Sammy? Dean inquired from the bed. No, no, said Sam. You stay there and keep sleeping. I think I just need to put her down. Sam abandoned his task and took Alex to her crib. Ever so carefully, he laid her down on the tightly tucked blanket inside. I'll just be a minute, Alex, don't worry, he said, once again not wholly reassuring in spite of his efforts. He zipped back to the little counter where his project waited and peeled the lid off the formula. As soon as he was out of view, Alex started blatantly crying, incensed at being left seemingly alone in her starving state. Crap, Sam hissed. Then more loudly for his niece, it's okay, Alex, I'm still getting your bottle going. Just a minute, bring her here, said Dean sleepily. No, Dean, I've got this, go back to sleep. Sam protested as he finally found a spoon. It's just for a moment. Calm down, little brother, Dean rumbled, his eyes still shut. Just bring her here. Sam relented as he spilled a good 2/3 of his spoonful around the bottle instead of in it due to his haste. He paced over to the crib and scooped up Alex as gently as he could. Hey, it's okay, he said. I'm sorry I left you there. Alex calmed down rather rapidly, although she was still clearly peeved by both the abandonment and her hunger. He carried her over to Dean, who although he still didn't bother to open his eyes scooted back a bit to make more room in front of him on the bed. Lay her here, he said, tapping the space he had just made. Slightly confused, Sam obliged, depositing Alex beside her father. As soon as she was resting atop the blankets, Dean placed his forearm on her other side to run parallel to her tiny body to guard her from falling. While she still grumbled with discontentment, she seemed to be significantly more settled. She's okay lying there but not in her crib. She doesn't need to be held, said Sam, perplexed. It's not about being held, it's about having company, Dean answered. In her crib she can't see anyone. Sam gave a frown of surprise. It was so simple, and yet he hadn't thought about it. He'd forgotten she was still developing object permanence. So the instant her family was out of sight, they ceased to exist. But even if that wasn't the case, it was nevertheless distressing to be alone when she was already upset. And though he was half asleep, Dean was the steady presence she needed to keep her from reeling. Huh, said Sam. Okay, then, I'll finish the bottle and be right back. Sam took just a couple tentative backward steps before pivoting around to his project. The making of Alex's snack went much quicker now that both his hands were free, and by the time he finally stuck the bottle in the microwave and started it up, he released a huge sigh and leaned against the counter as he waited, arms braced against the formica. He didn't see Dean open one single eye and look at him with an amused smile before closing his lid again. Kinda nice having an extra set of hands now and again, isn't it? He said to his daughter in a low voice. I just get to lay here and hang out with you, and your uncle's free to fix you up some grub. Not a bad team. You know, we might just make it through, baby girl. Sam looked over his shoulder, not having heard his brother's commentary. Alex looked so safe and in spite of her hunger relaxed beside her father. Dean had struggled so much in the past few weeks, and yet he never seemed to lack the confidence to look after her. But he had still struggled, and Sam had recognized it more than anyone else could have. To see them now actually content and comfortable together, just because he had relieved even the smallest bit of burden, brought him to a resolution. From then on, Sam made it his duty to support his brother and niece in whatever way they needed so neither of them would ever feel afraid or alone again. Blank. Sam stood at the doorway of his brother's bedroom, watching as Dean comforted his daughter. You two need anything before I go? Sam asked. No, we're good, said Dean. I'll give you a holler if we do. "'Kay," replied Sam. "I'll come running." Alex rolled over in bed, hooked her wastebasket with one hand, and vomited into its grocery bag-lined interior. There wasn't much quantity to her projection, but it was enough to give some relief. Not as much as she expected, however. Wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, she put the bin down and rolled onto her back, eyes shut, and released a grouchy sigh. Jen turned over her shoulder to look at her friend. "Did you just barf into the wastebasket?" she asked. "You didn't even stand up." It was just a little one," replied Alex. "Wasn't worth getting up. Are you okay?" Jenna rolled over to better address her. "Yeah, I'm fine. Must have ate something last night that didn't agree with me, was Alex's response. Don't tell Dad and Uncle Sam. They won't let me go with on this next hunt. Secret's safe, said Jenna brightly. I'm sorry you feel like crap. Poor little tummy. With that she gave Alex's abdomen a light but vigorous rub. Oh, God, don't do that. Alex gasped as she grabbed Jenna's wrist, half amused, half fighting back more bile. Oh man, you're that sensitive, said Jenna, concerned. Well, it takes more than 20 seconds for your stomach to settle after hurling. Chided Alex good-naturedly. Ah, Jenna said. It sounded mostly fake, but Alex knew her well enough to know she was genuinely upset she was in such discomfort. This was reinforced when she snuggled up to give Alex a hug as gently as she could, carefully avoiding her friend's stomach and resting her head on Alex's shoulder. Maybe you shouldn't go hunting, she added. No, I don't want to sit at home and just think about my nausea, Alex whined. That's so much worse, especially when the rest of you are out having fun. Weird definition of fun, Alex, said Jenna. You know us pretty well by now, replied Alex. It's not that weird in this family. I'll be fine, don't worry. I'll probably be back to 100% in a couple minutes now I've hacked up whatever was bugging me. Okay, I trust ya, Jenna relented. I don't know your body better than you do. Be weird if you did, said Alex. Jenna snickered. It was then that Sam came to Alex's door, knocking on the panel as it was already ajar. Hey, Alex, rise and shine. Oh. Sam went from his casual greeting to incredibly uncomfortable and awkward in the blink of an eye. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. Alex had to giggle just a little bit at the flush of red in her uncle's cheeks. I'll just leave you two alone, he shuffled on the spot and made to exit before Alex stopped him. It's okay, Uncle Sam, she said, still chuckling. Jenna just couldn't sleep alone. You didn't walk in on anything. Oh, said Sam, looking both relieved and as if he felt foolish. Yeah, I understand. Wow, sorry, I didn't mean to just make assumptions. I mean, what else were you going to think? Alex shrugged lazily. Sam gave a conceding frown. Fair point. Then Dean's voice echoed down the hall. Breakfast's almost done. Then you ready to go gank some vamps? Whoa, he stopped dead as he turned the corner, his eyebrows shooting towards his hairline and a hand suspended before him. Alex could have assuaged his shock, but she was also greatly enjoying the look on his face, especially as it turned to his familiar anxious, dorky grin. Sam kept quiet just to assess how his brother would handle the situation. Am I, interrupting something? Dean asked. Alex took in a breath before she gave a simple, no. Oh, Dean managed to keep any signs of relief to a minimum. Cool, I mean it's fine if you were, he added, shrugging. That's just not the conversation you expect to be having right away in the morning. I think I would have told you by now if I was a lesbian, Alex said, grinning warmly at her father. Well, if you knew, Sam shrugged. What do you mean, if I knew? I'd have figured that out years ago, said Alex. Not necessarily, replied Sam. Some people are well into adulthood before they're aware of their orientation. Alex looked skeptical. What, really? Are you kidding? Dean chimed in. Saz is older than the friggin' moon and I do. And he think he's landed on exactly who or what he's into. Both girls burst into hysterics. It took Alex a stupendous amount of control to hide how much it upset her stomach to laugh that hard. Sam just nodded mildly in agreement. Okay, but seriously, Dean rerouted the conversation and asked Jenna, do we need to flip your mattress or something? Sam rolled his eyes over to address him. Jenna was having trouble sleeping on her own. Replied Dean. Alex is my security blanket, Jenna elaborated, squishing herself up in a little ball on her best friend's shoulder. Alex patted her on the head comically. Hey, I get it. Dean gave a single, knowing nod. You needed backup. How'd you know? Jenna said in awe. It's nice knowing if something's trying to kill you in your sleep, someone might hear it and wake up. Said Dean. He jabbed a thumb at his adjacent brother. Sam's my security blanket. I usually stick him in a different bed, though. This elicited another round of snickers from Alex and Jenna. Anyway, up and at 'em, girls, he continued as he turned and exited the room. Eggs get cold fast. Sam shifted his gaze from his retreating brother to Alex and Jenna with a rueful but humorous squint. Like he can tell me where to sleep. I don't like needles. What? Jenna had broken the silence as they rumbled along the highway, the late evening summer sun throwing a warm glow into the interior of the Impala. A day's travel with a few scattered pit stops had put them somewhere outside of St. Louis. Their final destination was the small town of Clay, Kentucky. But with a brand new hunter in the back seat, they had decided to break the road time into 2 days to be sure she was fresh when the time finally came to besiege the nest. This was not something they had learned to do from Alex's first hunt. She had been sleeping better in the back of the Impala than in her own bed since she was an infant. Jenna, on the other hand, had admitted recently that the most time she'd spent in a vehicle in one shot was the trek from the Quad Cities to the bunker when they brought her home for Christmas break. So Sam and Dean kept an absent eye on the signs and surroundings for a good spot to make camp outside the gateway city. I don't like needles, Jenna repeated to Alex. These little pokey things going under my skin and transferring fluids, especially if the fluid's coming out. It's ishy. Alex stared. What? Why are we talking about this? She finally asked. Because vampires, Jenna hissed, leaning in. Alex had to think for a while, squinting past our friend and out the window to the empty space beyond that contained her clouded thoughts. Then finally it hit her. Oh, the blood-sucking. Jenna's entire upper body scrunched as she got the oogies. It's just she continued. I don't like it coming out. Like bleeding is fine, I'm used to bleeding, that's just life. Bleeding happens. Monthly, even, but like sucking. Like it's going through a straw, basically. I'm not a milkshake. Don't suck me through a straw. It's not natural. You might even say it's supernatural, Dean had to interject from the driver's seat. Wow, Sam chided him, hiding his amusement with all his might. You know, just because you're a dad doesn't mean you have to make jokes like one. You're better than that. I'm really not, Dean shook his head. No he's not, Alex agreed. No he's not, Sam relented. Hey, Dean let the humor drop a bit and addressed Jenna again, it's good to be averse to crap like that going in. Keep you from getting bit. I suppose, said Jenna. Don't want to turn into a vampire. Oh, a bite won't turn you, said Dean. That's the Hollywood version. No, you have to drink the vampire's blood to become a vampire. Oh, ew, Jenna flinched. That's gross. Why the heck would anyone drink a vampire's blood? Do people choose to become vampires? Well, no, Dean started, but Sam had to interrupt to play devil's advocate. Sometimes, though, he said. Sort of. Dean pumped his eyebrows in acknowledgement. Yeah, sort of. Sometimes there's an element of Stockholm Syndrome, Sam elaborated, turning slightly in his seat to talk to Jenna. Some nests will keep a person captive from a young age as a snack. Jenna grimaced and gasped before she said, oh Olg. Yeah, Sam agreed. And when they do this, the vampires will try to endear themselves to this person, even kind of worship them a little, because they're providing a service to keep all of the vamps alive. Some nests will even take pretty decent care of their captive. And then the human starts to believe they're doing this noble charity and feel loved by everyone in the nest, and eventually they will decide to become a vampire themselves and feed on one of their brethren. Usually the king or queen of the nest. Jenna paused, her mouth hanging open. Oh my god. Yeah, it's rough, agreed Sam. That's definitely the more insidious way vampires will turn someone, said Dean. The other way looks worse, but it really isn't. What's the other way? Asked Jenna. Wait, do I want to know? No, but you need to, replied Dean. They'll just oot themselves and smear the blood on your mouth. Ew, whined Jenna. God, gross. But yeah, definitely more acutely traumatic than slow burn traumatic. So, moral of the gruesome, scarin'. Story is don't get their blood in your mouth. Ding ding ding. Correct answer, little miss. Said Dean. You won the grand prize. What did she win, Sammy? Jenna won, and he dug in his jacket pocket and pulled out a little laminated card, her first fake ID. He handed it over his shoulder to Jenna, who took it with wide eyes, not sure if she was excited or terrified. Whether you're sneaking past security at the bank, or just really need a beer after digging up a grave, this ID will get you where you need to be, Dean added on. Use it wisely and sparingly, instructed Sam with a small, kindly smile. Thank you, said Jenna, looking down at the shiny, convincing false driver's license that listed her as over 21 years old. But her smile turned a little anxious. I'm afraid I already have one, though. What? Dean asked, surprised. I mean, it doesn't look as good as this one, Jenna said, shrugging. Can I see? Asked Sam. Sure. Jenna proceeded to dig in her mini purse and pull out her other fake ID. She handed it to Sam. He looked it over and almost immediately couldn't believe what he was seeing. Oh my god, he said. Who made this? Some guy who has work study in the art department, Jenna giggled. He sells 'em for, like, $20 a pop. And it worked? Asked Sam. Like it's been accepted at a liquor store or bar or a gas station. Yeah, at a bar, said Jenna brightly. Holy crap, said Sam. I'm trying too hard. Gimme, Dean said. Sam handed it over and Dean glanced between the fake license and the road a couple times. He only needed those couple times to identify the quality. Okay, whatever bar you were in needs to step up their carding game, said Dean. He flipped the little laminated sheet over and reeled. Oh my god, it's blank on the back. Holy shit, Sam chirped, taking the ID back to see the vacant field of white. Then he returned it to Jenna with a reassuring smile, saying, okay, well, don't use that one, use the one I gave you. But you paid $20 for it, so feel free to keep it for sentiment's sake if you want. Jenna felt a little embarrassed, but also amused. Okay, she snickered. Seriously, whatever bar that was is playing with fire. Dean couldn't help but continue. They're in a college town, they should be more wary. They'll get their asses sued. Wait, you two were at a bar? Yeah, Jenna shrugged. Okay, said Dean, and his overprotectiveness reared its head and his tone became short. Why, I wanted to teach Jenna to play pool, said Alex simply. And you had to go to an over 21 bar to do that? Dean pressed. Well, the tables at school are crap, and the ones at the 18+ bars are worse, of course, 'cause it's always the college kids there trashing them, so we went to one of the places where the locals go. Alex elaborated, completely unperturbed by her father's reaction. Well, it's hard to find a decent table anywhere, Alex, sighed Dean. She might as well practice on the crappy ones. I wanted her to learn on a normal surface first before going to challenge mode, was Alex's reply. Okay, fine, I get it, Dean relented. But you didn't drink while you were there, right? Just a beer or two, said Alex. Jenna just gave a wry, playful grin and side eye, but she didn't say out loud that she might have indulged just a touch more than her friend. Dean GHT her expression in the rearview mirror and threw up a hand in disbelief. Oh my god, he barked. Dean, calm down, Sam said, laughing softly at his brother's upset. They have a drink with us here and there all the time. Yeah, with us, retorted Dean. Not off on their own with a bunch of drunken adults hanging around. Were you all on your own? Did you have any friends with? How did you get home? Did you have a designated driver? Quote, yeah, the bus driver, Jenna couldn't help quipping. Don't you dare give me lip, Missy, Dean came back sharply but even. Jenna blushed a bit at being actually scolded by Dean for the first time and shrank back a little, although she couldn't make her smile disappear completely. Alex, on the other hand, gave a warm laugh and scooted to the edge of her seat. She reached over the back of the front bench and gave her father's shoulders a pat and vigorous rub like she was trying to start a fire. Don't worry, Dad, she said. We were responsible. Well, as responsible as it gets in that situation. I have my eyes open the whole time and never even drink enough to feel anything. Dean relaxed a bit at her reassurance, although he was still peeved and gave a grumbling exhale. There were still qualms he had to voice. Okay, but Jenna did, he continued. I told her, Alex explained, precisely and meaningfully, not to try a Long Island. Sam shook a little with laughter, saying mildly, oh, no, he was well aware that Jenna's tolerance did not compensate for her size. Ooh yeah, said Jenna, snickering. She did not throw up, Alex added. But neither did she walk a straight line. Sweet Jesus, Dean groaned. It's okay, Dean, said Jenna. Alex took good care of me. Dean huffed another sigh and growled, yeah, I know she did. Alex gave her father's shoulders a parting pat and plopped back in her seat, going cross-legged. Dean glanced in the rearview at her as she did so, noting her calm, cool, collected expression. He always worried about her, no matter what. But this was a bit different than some spirit or monster getting the drop on her at school. This was a situation she chose to go into, could actually plan for, and take preemptive precautions. And he knew she had the wherewithal to make a smart decision if things went sideways. He still hated the thought of it, but he also knew that if any 19-year-old would be able to handle an environment like that, it was his daughter. Okay, well, he wrapped up his cavalcade, his tone finally softened back to normal, no more drinking if you go there again. And bring some extra backup if you do. Okay, we will, Alex agreed. Good, said Dean. Oh, speaking of which, Alex suddenly piped up, I'm kind of low on cash, could we hit a bar tonight so I could hustle a little? Dean's head tilted back and he blinked slowly at her gall. Do you really think this is a good time to ask to? Sure we can. Sam cut him off with exaggerated joviality. Dean looked even more exasperated. I was hoping to stop somewhere for a nightcap anyway, Sam continued. And hey, maybe I'll hustle a little, too. Sounds like fun, right, Dean? Dean rolled his eyes over to his brother, glaring daggers. Sam just smiled back smugly. Yeah, sure, whatever, Dean finally agreed. Sweet, Alex sang briefly. Hey, you said it, Sam reminded his brother teasingly. If they're going to drink, you'd rather we were there to have their backs. Yeah, Dean mumbled. He hated when Sam was right, mostly because he couldn't contradict him. So all he said was, bitch. Jerk, Sam replied, still grinning. Shortly thereafter, they rolled into their chosen motel, and lo and behold, across the street was a relatively well-kept bar. It wasn't necessarily a rough joint, but it was certainly your classic down-home local watering hole. There were plenty of folks blowing off steam after work, but the odd biker was not an uncommon sight either. Plus a few people just looking for a good time. Back in the day, Dean would have been pegging the latter as soon as he walked in the door. That wasn't the case anymore. Now the first people he saw were the ones who took notice of Alex when she came into view. He wasn't out for a fight, just putting little mental tags on all the people to keep an eye out for as the night wore on. Alex saw them too, but as much as she was aware of the implications. She was also looking for her own mark. Anyone who showed interest gave her a head start on her play at the tables. Jenna was not as wary of these folks. Or any of the folks. She got that CKY feeling from a few of them and knew she wasn't in the safest place on the planet that she had left behind about 9 hours ago, but her reaction wasn't as much to put up defenses as to simply keep close to the 3 extremely experienced, skilled, and powerful fighters she had just walked in with. Several months of training had her fairly confident in her ability to hold her own in a scrap. But she knew her odds of victory were exponentially greater when surrounded by the Winchesters. In fact, she was pretty sure no one would even bother. The 4 of them made their way to the bar, happy to find a corner around which they could all cluster, the brothers on one side and the girls on the other. From that vantage point, Alex spotted the pool tables a short distance behind her father and uncle. She grinned. The bartender sidled up. What'll it be? He asked. Easy beer, said Dean. Make it 2, said Sam. And the ladies? Asked the bartender. Gin and tonic, replied Alex. Gin and tonic? Dean inquired under his breath. A little surprised. Alex shrugged. They've got a zip to them. He lifted his eyebrows and tilted his head away in acquiescence. Whatever floats your boat. Then it was Jenna's turn. Oh, how's your Long Island? Jenna, no, Alex instructed. Tonight is not the night to have you dancing on the tables. Bit of a lightweight? The bartender asked. Literally, Jenna quipped, and laughed loudly. Maybe a beer or a cider? He suggested. Jenna thought, quirking her mouth to the side and looking to the ceiling. Got any nitro stouts? The bartender appeared honestly though discreetly shocked at the request, then he seemed suspicious that she was yanking his chain. You like those? He asked. Jenna's eyes went a little maniacally gleeful. And she nodded with a wide grin and a cackle. Yeah, she answered him in a voice that was almost too deep for her frame and just a touch more emphatic than was comfortable. Okay, replied the bartender, brushing off the unusual order. He'd encountered far stranger things. Alex already had hers out and handed it over casually. Jenna had to fish in her purse to find her own and caught herself before she accidentally pulled out the unconvincing one. But finally she retrieved the little card and handed it to the bartender. He gave them both a once-over and returned them. All right, coming up. And he departed. Once the bartender was out of earshot, Dean turned to Jenna. We're going to have a chat about your drinking, he said firmly. Dean, they're in college, said Sam. Don't remind me, Dean said in a grumpy but pained voice. It could be worse, dude, said Sam. He looked over at the 2 young women. Have you tried any drugs? Like coke or psilocybin? Jenna asked. Shrooms. Alex elaborated without prying her eyes from the crowd of potential hustles. Oh, said Jenna. Then she made the sharp 180 from pleasant epiphany to energetic horror. Oh, no, that stuff's freaky. When we started last fall, the school made us watch these videos about drugs and alcohol and stuff, and there was this one guy who told this story about how he couldn't keep his friend from jumping out his dorm window because they tried mushrooms and he thought there was a grizzly bear in their room. That sounds about right. Hold on to that story, really lock it into your memory, and let it rule you. Dean encouraged, making his younger brother roll his eyes half-heartedly. Sam knew this was not the healthiest or most effective mentality to keep them from trying dangerous substances. But he let the elder do his coaching. Then Dean looked over at his daughter. "Alex, you're awfully quiet." She replied absently, the turn of her head toward her father delayed due to distraction. "What, sampled any hard drugs lately?" "Oh, no," she answered casually and turned her attention away again. "Sorry, watching the tables." "No, hunting's enough of a trip." Dean gave a single approving nod. "That's my girl." Alex continued her assessment, her gaze locked, but spared the time for a small smile. "See," Sam returned to his brother. "Okay, but plenty of bad crap happens with alcohol," retorted Dean. "Yeah, but it's not the only thing that happens," said Sam. He turned back to the girls. "Just drink in moderation. It's part of the experience. I made it through just fine. And you were a real party boy. Were you?" Dean came back. Sam shrugged, giving his brother a knowing look. "Oh, come on," said Dean. "You, Mr. Straight-Laced, Dean's List, Stanford Pre-Law. Got wasted at the fraternity blowouts every chance you got." "Not every chance I got," said Sam. "But plenty. Ask me how many keg stands I've done." Dean squinted at him, extremely irritated to be playing along. "How many?" Sam couldn't resist laughing a little. "I don't remember." There came a cascade of giggles to Dean's right, mostly Jenna's, though Alex was laughing lightly, too, even if she was still eyeing the pool tables. Dean shook his head. "You're a great influence, you know that. Remind me why I let you hang out around the girls." "Oh, you let me, do you?" Sam asked, grinning. "Tell me, father, how many nights have been obliterated from your memory?" Dean paused at Sam's words, glaring at him as he contemplated the question, then looked down at the sticky bar top sheepishly. Finally he lifted his head to Jenna and Alex. "Do as we say, not as we do," he instructed them humbly. Sam added with a chuckle and a good-natured tone, "You can have a good time, just be smart about where you are and who you're with. And dear God, pace yourself." "Again as we say, not as we do," Dean added, barely glancing over before he returned to inspecting the middle distance with an expression that was ever so slightly disturbed. Jenna figured he was remembering a particularly wild night. Alex guessed a few. Dean was sifting through about 20, and those were just the first ones that popped into his head. It had been a long time since he'd gone off on a good bender. And he attributed it to being too busy, or even just too old for that shit. He wasn't really aware this was a side effect of him actually attempting to set a decent example. Blank. Sam sighed noisily. "Well, we're not getting anything from the witnesses. I'll hit the lure," he said, popping open his laptop on the hotel room's table. "I'll see you later." Dean looked over confusedly from where he was half-heartedly and one-handedly folding up the changing mat on his bed while Alex balanced on his hip. "See you later. Where am I going?" Sam twisted in his chair to look back at his brother. "Aren't you going out?" Dean's confusion continued. "Why would I go out?" Sam had to breathe a laugh. "Dude, it's Valentine's Day." "It is," he added, surprise to his expression. "Yeah," said Sam. "You haven't been counting down the days. I figured you'd be chomping at the bit." "Excuse me, but have you not noticed the screaming, crying, teething 1-year-old who's been constantly 6 feet from our beds?" replied Dean, gesturing to the currently rather benign Alex, who fiddled absently with one of the buttons on his shirt. "I'm so tired I can barely keep my eyelids up. You think I'm getting anything else up tonight?" Sam snorted. "I can't argue with that logic. Although, you've toughed it out through a lot of Valentine's days before. Figured the lonely and desperate would be too great a temptation." "I mean, yeah, I guess, but I just don't really do that anymore," replied Dean as he packed up the rest of the stuff. "It's been a while since I had any reason to let loose." Then he got just a little quiet. "I guess nothing's really stopping me now." Sam paused and gave a minute, sad and slightly self-scolding huff as he realized what he'd foolishly forgotten. Lisa hadn't even been dead a year, and she'd just missed Alex's first birthday. "Hey man, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pushed like that," said Sam, turning in his chair. "That was habit, I'm just used to this day being." "No, hey, Sam, it's fine," Dean brushed it off, waving a hand and giving his brother a surface-level grin. "You're right, actually. If anything's going to get me back in the game, it's going to be Valentine's Day. I am really tired and all like, dead on my feet. But it is a tempting combination." Sam sniffed a laugh. He could tell Dean was upset at the thought of moving on and compensating with a sudden enthusiasm he hadn't had a moment ago. But today was probably too difficult a day to attempt to work through it. So he let Dean have his denial. Your favorite, was Sam's reply. Oh, yeah, said Dean. Lonely and desperate, really gets the ladies to cut to the chase. Couple nice words and a friendly smile. Then let the good times roll. Especially if you hit the trifecta. Oh, man. He laughed. Lonely, desperate, and daddy issues. Now there's a wild night. Sam sniffed a laugh and tried not to roll his eyes. Dean felt a tug at his shirt and glanced down at his daughter to make sure she wasn't pulling off any buttons. He wasn't worried about the shirt had gone through significantly worse. Rather, he didn't want her to choke on a liberated disc of plastic. Then his gaze turned straight in front of him and downward, and his eyes went wide as he stared at nothing. His entire body became rigid as an ice-cold chill swept through him from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. He stood there, impossibly still, for a very long time. Yeah, well, Sam was saying erstwhile. Having looked back over at his computer, it's up to you. I get it if you're too tired. We've both been burning the candle at both ends for a while now. Sam waited for a response, but eventually noticed not only a lack of reply, but also an odd amount of silence in general. His brow furrowed and finally he turned in his chair again to see his brother standing as if he were a living statue. Dean, Sam asked, and for a moment he was worried something supernatural was going on. Dean, I have to do everything right, the elder Winchester finally blurted, his gaze still fixed on empty space. Sam tilted his head, looking worried. Come again. Dean still couldn't make eye contact with Sam. Oh dear God. Sam, the things I did to those women. That they did to me, that we did to each other. Just then he glanced at Alex still fiddling with his buttons, unperturbed, and had to look away as an irrepressible gag racked him. Sam was confounded by this sudden, severe physical reaction. But it got him to realize, bit by bit, what the hell his brother was losing his mind over. And Sam's jaw slowly fell open. Dean's next words confirmed the inkling. Okay, Alex, listen to me. He shifted the almost toddler in his arms and gathered together his list, fairly panicked. I love you and I'll always be here for you, and I won't abandon you. Even if I do leave. I promise I'll always come back. And you, I won't try to control you. But I won't just leave you alone to do whatever, either. And nothing you could ever do won't be good enough for me, I will always be proud of you. Even if you kill a guy for no good reason, I'll still be like, hey, probably don't kill a guy for no good reason, but great knife work. And, crap, what else would they tell me? Ooh, oh, but you're not some perfect little angel who can't do anything wrong. That's way too much pressure and then you'll just want to rebel and be the opposite of an angel. Jesus Christ. His last words were a whimper and he dug his fingers into his hairline. It took everything Sam had to contain his laughter as he listened to his brother's soliloquy. It seemed the tables were suddenly and utterly turned. Alex, now distracted from the buttons, simply stared at her father with concern as he spoke, her brow furrowed and a slight pout on her lips. Dad seemed to have gone a little insane and she wasn't 100% incorrect. It was just odd. Some of the words he spoke were familiar, she was getting close to understanding them, but the look on his face and his tongue. He just didn't seem to match his mouth sounds the way they usually did. And it confused her, and she somewhat disapproved. And eventually she turned this look on her uncle, and it clearly communicated to him. I think you should take a turn looking after me for a little while. It was this expression that finally got Sam to burst out laughing. He stood and wandered over. What are you laughing at? Dean said, sounding terribly hurt and upset. Let me take her for a bit, Sam said kindly, still grinning with amusement as he reached for Alex and eased her out of Dean's hold. She did not protest. Yeah, okay, maybe, Dean replied. But I'm not giving you up, he had to add imploringly to his daughter. Oh my God, Dean, she knows, Sam laughed. She's not going to grow up and go wild. You're nothing like those dads. Holy crap, I hope not, Dean replied, bracing his hands on his knees and hanging his head to try and calm himself. All it seemed to do was clear space for a particularly vivid memory to pop into his brain. And he gagged again. Okay, dude, don't actually launch your lunch, okay, said Sam. We have to clean enough spit up as it is, we don't need to deal with yours. Okay, Dean said with a ragged voice. He slowly straightened up. Okay, but just, please, Alex, and he reached out a hand and thumbed his daughter's cheek briefly. Whatever you do, don't get involved with men like me. Dean wobbled for a moment, looking back over at nothing, then gagged again. Jesus, go lie down or something. Sam insisted. Yeah, Dean choked out. Yeah, I think I'll go scrub off a couple layers of skin or something. And finally he headed towards the bathroom. He stopped halfway there and turned on a dime. But I'll be right back. I'm not abandoning you, he called. Dean, he's seen you leave to take a shower before. Sam scolded him. I know, Dean replied, and at long last made it to the bathroom and shut the door behind him. In his absence, Sam chuckled and returned to the table where his computer stood open. He stood Alex up on his thigh, leaned against his torso, as he so often did when they researched together. Well, Alex, my dear little niece, he began, I have borne witness to many really bizarre and unbelievable things. Stuff most people couldn't even imagine. The magical, the mysterious, the horrible and twisted, all of it. Even a miracle or two. And, today your dad just realized that all the women he's spent an evening with were somebody's daughters. Now I've seen everything. There. What? Dean asked his daughter, pulled out of his reverie. Alex just gave a wry half-smile as she looked off across the bar's interior. Found one. She unzipped her leather jacket and popped off her stool. Dean looked taken aback at the move, tilting up an open hand questioningly on the bar top. The reaction did nothing to deter Alex, however, if she even noticed it at all. She had locked in on her target. The cool, calculating look in her eye like an eagle sighting a mouse disappeared as she approached the young man wandering around the slightly worse for wear table, pool cue in hand. Suddenly, a bright but slightly shy and innocent smile appeared on her face. Gosh, that looks like fun, she said. He looked around, surprised at being addressed. He managed to keep his glance at her entire person to a fraction of a second and instead focus on eye contact. Although this was difficult as her open jacket allowed sightline directly to her cleavage. Which was her intention, and with his lightning fast glance, she saw the first teeny tiny chip pop out of his walls. She didn't know it took a much larger chunk out of her father's. Dean had rotated on his bar stool to casually watch at a distance, and the sight of this jackass leering at his dog H's body made him feel just a little homicidal. He managed to tamp the rage down with a number of logical arguments he chided himself with inwardly. For one, he'd seen her hustle before. Hell, he'd taught her. This was a typical start to the dealings. Also, this wasn't the first guy to check her out, and as much as it set his insides on fire to acknowledge it, he knew it was far from the last. And above all else, he knew this was absolutely her goal. It was a part of her strategy. They suspected her less if they were distracted by her appearance. And she knew how to toe the line to get where she needed to go. So he took a slow, deep breath to calm himself, and kept a quiet eye on things as they progressed. He absently tried to make small talk with his brother, as much to distract himself as to look unassuming. And Sam played the same game, eyes open for Alex, but looking like he was mostly just chatting with Dean. Which made the elder feel marginally better. Jenna, on the other hand, did not help. She snickered behind him and pulled up the stray bowl of stale popcorn that hung out on the bar top, looking like she was settling in to watch a movie. Oh, this is gonna be good, she tittered. Sam saw Dean looking weary already. Take it easy, he said quietly and calmly. She's got this. I know, Dean said with resignation. Do you want to try? The pool player asked, smiling at being approached by this pretty young woman. Oh, really? Said Alex, sounding surprised. Man, I haven't played in forever. Can I? Yeah, absolutely, he agreed. Here there's another cue. He pulled out a second stick from under the table and handed it to her. She took it carefully, looking nervous and trying to settle somewhere between appearing apt with any sporting tool and completely unfamiliar with a pool cue. Behind her look of innocent trepidation, she planned the adjustments to her technique and grip given the warp of the wood she could feel in her hand. I only just broke, the young man continued. I was going for stripes, if you want to be solids. Yeah, okay, replied Alex. Don't expect too much out of me. I've really only played a couple times. No worries, he grinned. I'm Tom, by the way. Alex. Okay, so solids. She looked down at the table, and quirked her expression to make it look like she was baffled at where to even start, even though she had just pegged all 5 shots that would, in sequence, have her sinking all her balls within a couple minutes. Yes, all 5, there were 2 combinations in there. Then she took a jolting step to try an angle, and backtracked with a whine of uncertainty, then appeared to decide on her first course of action and moved back to that first shot. She leant over, took aim and scratched. Oh my god, she's hilarious, Sam breathed to his companions. who suppressed laughs along with the younger Winchester brother. Alex looked over at Tom with embarrassment as he tried to hide a good-natured chuckle. "It's okay," he said. "Just gotta knock the rust off. Do you want to try again?" "No," Alex said playfully, rolling her eyes. "It's your turn, let's at least try to follow the rules. Tell you what, if I scratch again, then I might take the do-over offer." "Okay, sounds like a plan," agreed Tom with a nod and a smile. Then he took his shot. He sunk the next two, and was short getting the third all the way to the pocket. Alex got the ever so slight impression he had tried to be impressive, then pulled back to keep her from being put off the game altogether. She played into it. "Ah, dang," he said at his last shot. "Hey, far better than me," Alex said. "I'm lucky if I hit a ball at all, let alone sink two in a row." She accented the comment by leaning on the table, which had the effect of her upper arm pressing one of her breasts a little more up and out of the collar of her tank top. "Well, now's your chance to show me up," said Tom, stepping graciously out of the way. "Your turn." "Oh, eek, okay." She inspected the table and picked her next shot. There were two other options that were far easier, but she chose this particularly tricky angle as it put her somewhat in front of her opponent. She made sure to settle into her rear leg. She didn't need to see behind her to know Tom had blushed and looked away from her posterior. No one but Alex heard her infinitesimal intake of breath as she felt a small but sharp, brief pain just above her right hip. "That's new," grumbled Dean, turning to take a drink of his recently arrived beer. "She used to just play young and naive. She's starting to look and act more mature. She has to match that with her hustle or he'll see right through the scam," said Sam. "It's working, too. Dude is undeniably blushing." "Oh, nice," he added under his breath. Dean glanced over. Alex had made the clever decision to fake beginner's luck and sink the extremely difficult shot she'd chosen, just to exclaim, "Holy shit, did you see that?" and elicit a bark of laughter from Tom. He offered a high five, which Alex accepted with a bit of a dead fish slap. Behind the brothers, Jenna chuckled. "Yeah, 'cause that's how she high fives," she mumbled, still munching on the popcorn. "You've been on the receiving end of one of those, have ya?" Dean asked, glad of the distraction. "Yeah, we try not to high five indoors because the shock wave would break stuff," said Jenna casually. "Give as good as you get?" Sam asked, a little surprised but at the same time not at all. "I only high five when it's been earned, and then there's no holding back," replied Jenna, squinting and nodding meaningfully. "Show me what ya got," Sam said, and held up a hand across the corner of the bar. "Nah, Jenna chided playfully. "As I said, you gotta earn it." "What?" protested Sam good-naturedly. "Come on, nitro stouts." Dean held up his own hand, not even bothering to look over. "Yeah, nitro stouts," and Jenna swung hard, the sound of the impact audible throughout the establishment. A few people nearby flinched at the sudden crack and looked around. Dean gave an approving frown and nod. "Not bad," he said. Then he turned away so Jenna couldn't see his expression of pain and a little bit of fear. Lowering his arm below the bar top. "Oh my God, what did she just do to my hand?" he whispered desperately to Sam, who choked a little on his drink as a laugh. "Can you look? Is it bad?" Dean turned his palm up for his brother to inspect. "You're fine," Sam chuckled. Then went back on his assessment as he looked closer. "Actually, you're turning pretty red already." "Jesus," Dean breathed, carefully trying to flex his fingers to bring the nerves back to life. Sam cleared his throat, grabbed Dean's chilled beer off the bar and stuck it in his thoroughly tenderized hand. The cool glass immediately relieved some of the sting. "And that's 50 years of brotherhood right there," Dean said. 47, calm down, Sam corrected. They clinked their bottles absently. Dean took a swig of his drink. And although the entertaining albeit painful tangent had given him much needed relief from his paternal distress, returning his attention to Alex's hustle sucked him right back into the previous conversation. "She's not that mature," he commented. "Dude, she's nearly 20, Sam came back. "Yeah, nearly," insisted Dean. "She's barely into 19. She's still a teenager." "Okay, in numbers, sure. But has Alex ever really acted like she was a teenager?" was Sam's argument. "If she did, she grew out of it real fast." "Too fast," Dean mumbled, and his gaze turned hard as he tried not to draw the parallel between his daughter's childhood and his own, and how fast he had to grow up, too. A twinge of fear and regret stirred somewhere dark and deep. Sam could see the gears turning in his brother's head. He knew why immediately, thanks to 47 years of brotherhood. "Hey," he got Dean's attention. "She's okay," That was different. Dean grumbled acquiescence, yeah. Though he didn't sound entirely convinced. She got a lot of chances to be a kid, Sam insisted. Lots more than we ever did. I know, Dean sighed, turning his attention to his beer for another drink. Even so, she never really acted her age. Sam sniffed a laugh. Yeah, no kidding. Dean's expression of reluctant concession became mixed with a touch of concern as he watched Alex at the pool table. She has kind of filled out, too. Sam lifted his eyebrows questioningly. Filled out? Yeah, I mean, doesn't she look a little more? Dean grew rather uncomfortable as he tried to elaborate without outrightly stating what he meant, and he gestured awkwardly and incomprehensibly to try to get his point across. I don't know, top-heavy. Sam glanced between his niece and Dean, and decided to be the adult in the situation. Are you trying to say her breasts look bigger? He asked. No, Dean protested. I mean, yes, not that I'm looking. Sam rolled his eyes at the overcompensation. Listen, I know what my baby girl looks like and she just looks different, Dean finished his explanation. Then the concern edged back in. I mean, is that normal? Is she not done growing? Could be. Could also be freshman 15, Sam shrugged. Come again? Dean asked. Freshman 15, reiterated Sam. You hit college and your routine changes and before you know it you've gained 15 pounds. Dean looked disbelieving. That's a thing. Yeah, said Sam. You've seen this happen. It happened to you. Are you kidding? Said Sam. I went from hunting to studying law at a desk for 14 hours a day. I packed on like 20. What? Yeah, said Sam. Nah, you hadn't added 20 pounds of fat by the next time I saw you, Dean argued. Well, by senior year. I'd gotten into enough of a routine I could squeeze in some physical activity more regularly, said Sam. And if you didn't notice, by then I had filled out a bit, too. Yeah, you were a beanpole when you left, Dean had to agree. I was a little less worried you'd get broken in half when I dragged you back into hunting. Sam sniffed a laugh. Okay, freshman 15, but all of it just on her chest. Dean continued. 'Cause the rest of her looks about the same. Dean, there's a lot of reasons women grow some extra breast tissue, Sam harped at him. Hormonal shifts due to age, going on birth control, hell. Maybe she didn't change at all, she's just wearing a different bra. Why would she be on birth control? Asked Dean indignantly. Sam gave the elder Winchester an exasperated but knowing look. All right, Dean replied grouchily, holding up a dismissive hand. Well, maybe she got a new bra. Hey Jenna, Dean twisted in his seat. Jenna replied, looking over with a warm smile. She appeared quite content through all of this. A good show, some quippy conversation, well-salted popcorn, and a solid beer had her set up with all she needed for a relaxing, pleasant evening. Did Alex get a new bra? Dean asked. What, the one she's wearing? Jenna inquired. Yeah, Jenna gave a brief cackle. Hell no, I saw her pick it out this morning. That thing is ancient and way too small. I mean, have you looked at her? She is pouring out of it. One wrong move and she's gonna bust, like, 3 seams and a hook. "K," replied Dean, resigned as he looked away. Sam could tell the worry was starting to put cracks in the defensive wall of irritation Dean had built. Dean, she'd tell us if something was wrong, Sam said, insistent but not unkind. She would. Dean glanced at his brother. And shifted in his seat as he heaved a sigh. Yeah, you're probably right. Darn, exclaimed Alex with exaggerated dismay as Tom sank his last stripe. I mean, that figures. You've obviously played a lot more of this than I have. I will admit, though, I feel like I'm starting to catch on. Yeah, said Tom, you did seem like you were starting to settle in a little better. Form got better. Okay, so it wasn't just me, replied Alex. Tell you what, let's have a little extra fun. $20 on the next game. Alex pulled out a 20 and popped it on the rail of the pool table. Seriously? Tom asked, incredulous but amused at the same time. Yeah, why not? Said Alex. Tom glanced between her and the bill she had offered up, bewildered at the boldness, but shook his head and shrugged. All right, he said. I'm game if you are. Oh, yeah, said Alex playfully. I'm game. And so they played another round. And Alex lost. And then another double or nothing. And Alex lost. And another and another. And Tom started to feel bad about taking Alex's money, because he could see that she was getting better each time they played and the margin of winning kept growing smaller. But still she lost over and over. But on the last shot of the last losing game, Alex made the fake connection. Well, there's no way I can win now, but I'll at least try and sink that one, she said. She moved to line up her shot, appearing to think hard, absently nibbling at her lower lip. In her periphery she caught Tom blushing again as he watched her. Then she jumped and gave pause with a surprised, "Oh. What?" Tom asked. "Oh my gosh, my trig class," said Alex. "I just finished my first trigonometry class at college and there's about a billion equations I could have been using this whole time. Why didn't I think of that? Gosh, I wonder." Alex stared at the table, cocking her head. She ran the calculation in her head, even though she didn't need to. Always good to keep the information fresh over summer break. Then she lined up her shot, some ridiculous rebound off 2 rails around another ball to try to drop the 8 down the side pocket and made her play. "Whoa," Tom called out in amazement. "Gah, dang, that would have made it." Alex cried at the ceiling. Her angles were perfect but she had intentionally hit too light, and the cue ball didn't reach the 8. And it stopped at an excellent spot for Tom to sink his last ball in the 8 shortly thereafter. "Hey, A for effort," he said once the little, black sphere clunked its way down the pocket. "Thanks," Alex said, a little despondent but still clearly having fun. "But honestly, I think that trig helped a lot. What do you say? One more game? Double or nothing again?" "Oh, God, I don't know, Alex," said Tom. "That's going to be like $200 by now. I'd feel like such an ass taking that." "Hey, what makes you so sure you're going to take it?" Alex replied playfully. "I mean so far, IED not to say he'd just skunked her the entire night." "Now, Tom, never say never," said Alex. Tom shook his head with a wide grin, looking off across the barroom. Then he said, "How about this? Instead of double or nothing if I win," and he locked his gaze on hers, "we get a drink. Maybe go back to my place." Alex gave a little smile back, and wobbled her head in thought. She wandered a little closer to him. "Okay, if you win. We do that, and if I win," she looked wryly in his direction, though there wasn't much distance between them at this point, $400. Tom gave a laugh at the gall. Her outrageous confidence in combination with her flirt was almost too much to stand. But finally he gave a nod. "You got yourself a deal," he said. "Shake on it," Alex said, holding out her hand. And they shook. Alex let her fingertips slide along his as they released. Then they racked the balls and got ready for their next game. "You want to break?" Tom asked. "I mean, I can," Alex laughed. "You've seen me break, it's not great. But hey, maybe that trig's gonna help me there, too. Give it the good old college try, right?" said Tom. Alex gave one more laugh. Then she took up position at the end of the table and placed the cue ball in her favorite spot. She sank down and took aim, and the calm, cool, quiet steel came over her expression. If Tom hadn't been so distracted and wasn't having such a good time, the sight would have frightened him. Alex let go of all the calculations, she didn't need them. Instead she just saw the lines, and her body settled into the form that just felt right. That gave her the mechanics needed to throw as much power behind her cue as possible. If Jenna's high five had startled people, the solid, resounding crack of Alex's break drew a whole different kind of attention. The patrons in the bar who had enough experience with billiards immediately recognized the sound. Across the room, Dean didn't have to see the table to know the balls had scattered all across the surface. 3 of them sinking already. He let a small smile cross his face. "There she goes," said Sam. "There she goes," Dean agreed. Tom's face had gone slack, his mouth hanging open as he watched the balls ricochet. Alex said, straightening. "That worked. Guess I'm stripes this time." Then she rounded the table, making shot after shot. Each ball zipped into their pockets at breakneck speed, banging noisily on their way to the bottom of the table. It didn't take long for Alex to get to the 8 ball. It was a tricky angle, though. She hitched a hip onto the rail and dropped her cue behind her. 8 ball, corner pocket, she said. It banged noisily as it dropped down the hole. She slid off the table. "Geez, what if I'd thought of that class sooner?" Alex joked. "You must have got a really good grade," said Tom, still looking absolutely shocked. "Ah," Alex grumped, "A on the final. I knew that one cosine tripped me up, but I didn't go back. Should have, but I didn't." "All right, handsome, I believe we had a deal." Tom stared at her with disbelief. Then slowly he grinned and shook his head and pulled out his wallet and started counting out the last of his cash. He handed it over, and got a kindly grin in return. "Thank you, sir," said Alex. "Any chance you still want to get a drink?" Tom couldn't stop himself from asking. Alex shrugged, "Maybe next time I'm through town. But for now, I better get back to my traveling companions. Don't want to keep them waiting. Good game, Tom. See you round. Alex turned away with a kind smile. He tucked the wad of cash into her back pocket. She had considered slipping it into her bra, but in a fleeting instant worked out that if she tried to stuff anything extra in there the fabric might give. Not to mention she was kind of sore and didn't want to go fishing around in an already tight cup. So instead she jutted out her hip while she walked away and smacked the pocketed wad. Tom slowly dissolved into silent, shaking laughter. Rooted to the spot, her Uncle Sam also barked a laugh at the move, and Jenna wheezed soundless cackles. Dean, however, dropped his head and pinched the bridge of his nose. Did you have to do the smack? Dean begged Alex once she was within earshot. Yeah, I did, Alex chuckled. She rounded the bar and took a seat. I thought it was hilarious, Sam said, then offered her a cheers. And an excellent hustle. Well done. Thank you, Uncle Sam, said Alex, hoisting her gin and tonic, which had long since been awaiting her return, and clinking it with her uncle's beer. Dean held up his own bottle before she could pull away. Yeah, good job, baby girl, he said. Thank you, Dad, Alex added with a second clink. She took a sip, then cringed at the sharply bitter flavor. Oh, wow, she said quietly. She then glanced around to make sure the bartender wasn't nearby. Is anyone else's drink, like real bad? No, but we've all got bottles, Dean answered her. Here, let me try, said Jenna. Dean intercepted the drink as Alex handed it over. Jenna rolled her eyes, but smiled a little anyway. He took a thoughtful taste, then shrugged. I mean, it's a gin and tonic, so it's always gonna taste like crap, but I don't notice anything wrong, he said. Here, Sam snagged the glass from his brother. So everybody but me, said Jenna, not necessarily upset. Yeah, said Dean flatly. Sam shook his head and handed it back to his niece. Yeah, just a normal G&T. Weird, said Alex, taking her drink back. Maybe I've gone off it. Some bartenders are magic, said Dean. Maybe the ones you've had were just the perfect mix for you. Yeah, maybe, said Alex, though she sounded unconvinced. She took one more test, again encountered a severely bitter sting, and set the drink aside. Sticking out her tongue with a quiet bletch. It was about then the sound of a loud, angry voice drifted across the barroom, slowly rising above the ambient din. Dean Lowe walked over to see Alex's victim looking exasperated as he tried to calm down his friend. The young man was quite a bit larger than Tom, and looked a good bit stupider, too. He certainly was a lot more hot-headed. His face was literally turning red. Eventually, a few words became audible. She hustled you, man. Took your fucking money. Dude, calm down. No, she's a fucking thief. And a whore. I'm going to get your money back. No, Harry. He turned away from Tom, the latter not even bothering to try and stop him. It seemed he knew better than to try. Clearly fuming, Harry stomped his way over to where Alex was sitting. He didn't get but a few steps. With little more than efficiency, Dean came to his feet and put himself between the oncoming assailant and his daughter. Even though Harry was still most of the way across the room, he slowed and came to a stop as Dean stared him down. He didn't look angry, nor was he even standing like he was ready for a fight, but his reposition had created a kind of wall. And simply from the set of his eyes, like he'd seen and fought shit, this young buck couldn't even imagine. Harry knew that if he did so much as start an argument with Alex, he would be dead before he hit the tacky worn floor. He didn't know why, but he knew. Sam was pretty sure this hotshot had gotten the message, but just in case there were any scant ideas still floating around his brain. The younger Winchester slowly stood and moved to stand at his brother's shoulder. Even though his hands were in his jacket pockets and his face calm and neutral, his stature combined with his ever so slight but defiant lift of his chin put the final nail in Harry's revenge coffin. It was always the quiet, unassuming ones who were shockingly the most dangerous. Which he didn't apple. Why to the two women now hidden behind the brothers, not knowing he could have just as easily had his ass handed to him by either of the girls. And though it was misogyny from Harry, Alex knew that her father and uncle were well aware of this fact and that their reaction was instinctual. She could handle herself, but it was all too comforting to know they were always in her corner, that they would ever hesitate to put themselves between her and danger. So she sat calmly, a small, warm smile drifting onto her face. And in the little more than a few seconds it took to make the impression, Harry changed his mind. Lazily waving a dismissive hand with irritation and turning away. The situation now diffused before it even started. Sam and Dean returned casually to their seats. Jenna gave a little chuckle. I think Alex could have handled that one, she said. I don't care, said Dean. He's goin' through me first. Sam sniffed his own laugh. Then me. Jenna's expression admitted a little amusement. But she still seemed unconvinced. I'm too tired to bother with a bar fight right now anyway, Alex shrugged. She tried to sound like she was making a lame excuse, but she had to admit she was tired. And slowly more and more tired. Almost by the second. She expected to relax a bit after the hustle, but this seemed like more than usual, and the tiniest flash of concern sparked in the back of her mind. Maybe it was just the long drive in combination with the extended bout of acting and billiards. Still it was odd. Are you done for the night? Dean asked her, seeing her expression fall. Want to hit the hay? Alex replied noncommittally, shrugging. But as she looked at her abandoned gin and tonic and considered the other drinks available to her at the bar and a wave of nausea edged up merely at the prospect, she decided to cave a little. Yeah, maybe. All right, let's bounce, said Dean, finishing his beer and throwing down some cash for his tab. They all made their way out of the establishment, trickling out at whatever pace suited each of them. Dean came up next to Alex, however, while Sam and Jenna trailed behind, and put an arm over her shoulders. He tucked up next to him just enough to be close but still comfortable walking. Alex lazily tossed her arm around the back of his waist. You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? He asked, not whispering but quiet enough that only she would hear. Wrong, she replied. Like if you weren't feeling well, he elaborated. Oh yeah, I'm fine, said Alex. Maybe just a little off is all. Nothing's wrong. We're going into a nest tomorrow, baby girl. I need you on your game. Don't want ya getting bit. Nah, I know, Alex insisted. I'll be back to 100% by morning, I'm sure. And you'll let me know if you're not? Dean asked insistently. Yeah, I will, Alex smiled. Promise. Kay, Dean said, satisfied enough with her answer. Love you, too, Mo. RNING spent praying to the porcelain gods in her and Jenna's motel room lavatory made Alex extremely irritable, because she knew she was going to have to admit to her father she was sick and would get sidelined for a massive raid on a vampire hideout. She hated missing out on hunts like this. But after she hacked up one last time, rinsed her mouth out, and headed toward her door to go to Sam and Dean's adjacent suite, she realized she was actually feeling much better. Like, a lot better. Why better, what the hell? You okay? Jenna asked, zipping up her toiletry bag and tucking it into her suitcase. Alex shrugged. Yeah, I guess so. You ready? Jenna blew out a gusty breath of apprehension. As ready as I'll ever be. Alex chuckled. Don't worry, we've got quite a ride still before we even meet our informant. And breakfast. Quote, and that they did. Jenna was rapidly learning that the Winchesters had a knack for finding the best greasy spoons that didn't even show up on a web search, no matter where they went in the country. It was like a sixth sense, and she had moments when she wondered if they had set up some magical spell or a sigil that would guide them to the most satisfying bacon and eggs whenever they were hungry. When she asked their reasoning, however, their answer for their choice was so perfectly logical she could tell it was experience, skill, and careful analysis that brought them to that particular dive. Perhaps if she asked for the explanation enough times, she'd develop the sense, too. Forget lore and self-defense. This seemed the most relevant of acquirable skills. The next most relevant was learning to entertain oneself over a 3.5-hour drive, which was the short leg of this particular journey. Little did Jenna know that it used to be even L.S. stimulating before Alex was hanging out in the back of the Impala at a very young age. However, she had no idea the burden she lifted off the brothers just by being around. Jenna never seemed to run out of things to talk about. And usually she conversed with Alex, who was just as happy to be entertained. They became like a themeless radio show that ranged from the most benign and everyday topics to the most bizarre and outlandish. And once in a while, the brothers would chime in, or were roped in by one of the girls. The steady stream of chatter became a babbling brook that made the miles pass quickly. And slightly after lunchtime, they landed at the most bohunk but oddly quaint but also slightly disturbing little hotel Jenna had ever laid eyes on. The exterior barely looked like a hotel at all. But the interior was finished to appear almost eclectic. Nevertheless, there were small pieces of decor and paraphernalia here and there that seemed like they had been stolen from an about to shut down for lack of visitors museum. It made Jenna cock her head in confusion when she walked in, then jump in her boots with a small squeak when she turned and was surprised by the most Sue RLY looking deer head awkwardly hung just to her right. What? Alex asked her friend. Jenna pointed at the trophy buck, a curl in her upper lip as her communication to Alex. Her friend inspected the preserved creature and cringed slightly. Ew, she said, wondering why the taxidermist would have set the deer's face that way. You two okay? Sam asked, turning back at overhearing the exchange, his motion getting Dean's attention as well. I mean, have you seen that thing? Alex asked her uncle in an undertone, pointing. The brothers grimaced as the girls had, giving a quiet, disconcerted, slightly disgusted, ooh, in unison. I'd get my money back on that one, Dean commented. Yeah, I have enough dead things trying to kill me, don't need a deer added to the list, agreed Sam. Tell you what, after we hit the nest, we'll come back and salt and burn Monty here, said a voice from behind the four of them. They all turned to see a barrel-chested man in flannel and a ball cap standing with his hands in his pockets, grinning. Hey, Andy, said Dean, going in for a rough hug. Hey, man, how's it going? Sam said kindly as he embraced in turn. I tell ya, better now there are some Winchesters here, said Andy. When he looked past them at the girls, he added, and you brought some back up. Only the best, said Dean. Hiya, girly, Andy teased Alex. Don't call me girly, she shot back, giving the man a playful punch in the shoulder. They gave each other a hug that was slightly more like a wrestling match, though still relaxed enough to not call too much attention to themselves amidst the scant lodge patrons. When they parted, Andy tousled her hair and she swatted his hand off. I know I say this every time and you're far past your last growth spurt, but I swear you've grown, said Andy. Well, a couple more years of hunting under the belt makes me look a little taller, Alex joked, making Andy laugh. Feeling pretty confident, huh? He asked. Oh, she's scary good, Jenna chirped from behind Alex, the latter pivoting to let her into the conversation. And who's the fresh meat? Asked Andy good-naturedly. This is my friend Jenna, said Alex. We got put together as roommates for freshman year and actually got along. And you brought her hunting? Andy asked, amused but also perplexed. Well, we met a few demons right before Christmas break, so she kinda had to, said Alex. Also scary, Jenna nodded casually. You ready for some vampires? Andy asked her. Not really, Jenna had to be honest. But I wasn't ready for the demons, either less ready, probably, and I'm still here, so. She shrugged. Andy chuckled and glanced over at the brothers. I like her. Well, welcome to the life, kid. It's a rough one, but it's good work, and there are a few good folks in it. And you're lucky to be hanging with the Winchesters. Probably safest hunters to get in with. Or least safe, I don't know. Depends on the day, Sam had to admit, while Dean just stared into space and nodded his head knowingly. Well, your first run at a vamp's nest shouldn't be too bad with this many of us, Andy continued. Y'all want some lunch? Better to plan a raid on a full stomach. The vampires had been around town just long enough for people to start noticing. But as far as Andy could tell, they'd only moved in about a year ago. Before that the trail was hard to trace. But, what he knew for sure was that there were about 8 of them in the nest. A little outnumbered, but the Winchesters had been outnumbered before. The trick was to catch them scattered and by surprise. The long-since abandoned mill was set up just down the valley by the creek. 3 entrances made it fairly easy for the gang to pair up and take the building from multiple angles. Dean sighted in the side service entrance. Sam and Jenna the side opposite, and Andy and Alex waited to come through the front double door. Each of the 3 had their own set of binoculars to spy in the windows so the Y could assess how many vampires were present in the visible areas of the mill. They texted their observations in a group chat rapidly to coordinate the strike. 2 in the east now, texted Sam. 2 here, 2, replied Dean. Good, said Sam. No, that leaves 4 in the middle, Dean came back. We only see 3, Alex chimed in. 1 must be away from the windows. Then let's draw them out, said Sam. Alex, Andy, wah. It until 1 or 2 of the middle ones leave after we hit the sides. Okay, agreed Alex. When you're ready, Sam, texted Dean. Go, was Sam's last text. The brothers and Jenna crept up on the sides of the nest, machetes in hand. Careful to avoid detection until there was no cover left to hide in. Then they dashed across the open ground and burst in through their respective doors. Dean made his intran, CE first and immediately removed the head of one vampire. The next one dodged his attack. It grabbed an ancient sack of flour and heaved it at him. While Dean ducked under the bag, the creature sprinted in his direction, looking to tackle him. Luckily, the hunter straightened in time to sidestep, simultaneously attempting another swing for the vamp's head. It reacted just quickly enough to get little more than a haircut. Another swing on the backstroke it managed to avoid, and the third it blocked by grabbing a hold of Dean's arm. The bastard was fast. Blank. On the other side, Sam and Jenna had a similar experience. Catching their vampires by surprise meant Sam was able to quickly decapitate the first one within reach. The second was close enough to attack Sam and attempted to shove him down. It was fairly ineffective, however, as it was driven by panic and not nearly as forceful as she meant to make it, and the hunter merely stumbled away and came to a knee to catch himself. Slow to start, but quick to react, Jenna jumped in and hacked at the vampire's side. She was sickened to feel the blade sink deep into the creature's flesh and organs, especially as it screamed. The sound was so human. Jenna was quickly pulled from her guilt when the vampire, although she sounded human, didn't react in a human way. A human would have fallen to the floor. Vampire turned and clawed at her wildly. Jenna was not prepared for this level of chaotic attack, so she swung her machete haphazardly at her opponent's flailing arms, backpedaling. Before the vamp could get the best of her, however, Sam was back on his feet and severing her head from her shoulders. Unfortunately, this delivered a spray of blood across Jenna's face. She shut her eyes and mouth just in time. Crap, Sam said quickly. Did you swallow any? Jenna shook her head, carefully wiping the spatter from her face with her shirt sleeve. Sam sighed relief. Good. Sorry. Part of the job. It's okay. I'd rather be sticky than dead, Jenna said. Then, unable to hold back the disgust as she looked at the crimson spatter, warm and sticky. Sam gave a breath of a laugh. Then the Ontario. Our door to their room banged open as another vampire entered. Sam whirled to face it, and couldn't stop a twitch of a smile at the sight. It was working. Blank. Out front, Alex saw the vampires in the main room getting drawn away by the sounds of fighting, first to the east, then to the west, and slowly one turned and ran off to investigate. That's our cue, said Alex, dropping her binoculars. She and Andy pelted across the grass and the weed-choked remnants of the gravel driveway to the front door. The two remaining vampires saw the hunters coming and, with a look of terror adorning their faces, raced to block the door with whatever they had handy. Before they got the chance to grab anything substantial, Alex put on an extra burst of speed and proceeded to throw all caution to the wind. With a running leap, she curled up and turned sideways as her entire body catapulted through one of the double doors, completely detaching it from its fellow in the frame. She came down with the sheet of wood, resulting in flattening one of the vampires beneath her. The other jumped away to avoid splinters and potentially broken bones. But Andy was quick to follow. Alex threw the newly cleared entrance and immediately engaged the second, who frantically tried to make space between herself and the hunter. The one beneath Alex, however, took out his rage on the door and used it to throw her off him. Though it allowed him freedom, he didn't realize it gave Alex an unintentional assist to her feet. Now back in balance, she turned on a dime and came down on the creature as it tried to stand, swinging her machete hard, but it threw up an arm to block her. So she swung again, and he blocked again, still trying to rise, but this time her weapon took off his arm, and he screamed. The third strike fell true and his body crumpled to the ground, his head rolling off across the floor. Alex turned then and saw Andy struggling and failing with the other vampire. They wrestled, locked in an unmaintainable grip, and then the vamp sank her teeth into Andy's shoulder near his neck. He shouted at the bite and sank to the ground, overwhelmed and rapidly weakening due to the lightning-fast blood drain. His complexion paled visibly. Alex darted across the room and kicked the vampire off her victim. It cringed away before she got close enough, though, and didn't receive the full force. But the blow was still enough to put her off balance and she staggered backward. Alex followed close behind, a flurry of blood-stained blade, until finally that vampire's head rolled, too. Alex returned to her injured companion and knelt beside him. Hey, Andy, she said. You okay? Jenna's right, he replied good-naturedly, even though he looked half unconscious. You are scary. Are you okay? Alex implored, although she couldn't repress a smile at his teasing. Yeah, I'm fine, replied Andy. Just need a sec. She took a lot real fast. It's okay, Andy, said Alex. We've got a minute. The vamps are all broken up. Watch out for the other one, said Andy sleepily. The other one, the fourth or eighth we never saw, he explained. And at that moment Alex was tackled to the ground. Blank. In the adjacent room, Dean was punched in the face. Hard. He went shoulder first into a pile of crates. The vampire followed close behind, grabbing at his jacket front. But Dean had just enough time to reposition his machete and it sank deep into the creature's shoulder. It screamed in pain, even if the injury was of no consequence to him. The sudden shock combined with the solid foot and a half of steel kept him from proceeding forward, giving Dean time to get a leg in between them and kick it away. The vampire reeled, and Dean was hot on his heels. But it dodged his charge, and in that same move managed to grab him. Successfully, and in that move it shoved him through the door at the other end of the room. Dean came to the concrete floor, rolling with his momentum to absorb the rough landing. It still hurt, though. His motion to stand was not as smooth as his roll. Nevertheless, he made it to his feet and found himself on the second level of the room behind the front entry. There were only 10 or so feet between the wall and the balcony overlooking the mill room. Dean quickly set up the out-of-bounds lines in his mind as he turned and faced his opponent. The vampire prowled toward him through the remnants of the door. But he stopped several yards away. "Why are you bothering us?" he asked, and immediately Dean knew he was a snake oil salesman. "We're just making our way through the world, like everyone else. Who are we actually hurting?" "Really?" Dean shot back disbelievingly, his eyebrows lifting an incredulous smile creeping onto his face. "And just how many throats have you torn out all by yourself?" "Circle of life, my friend," the vampire replied. "Lions gotta eat, herds gotta be thinned. It's not necessarily hurting. It's population management. And you do exactly the same, don't you? Going around killing whoever you want." "No, not whoever I want," Dean answered honestly. Because I tell you what, I may not be innocent, but neither are the assholes I take out. And that's the difference between you and me." "How noble," the vampire quipped. "Tell me, how noble do you feel when the hunt is over and you look back on your dirty work? Does the blood remind you of the crimson velvet worn by kings? Is that what it does for you?" Dean replied. "You kind of act like it does. In fact, I think you're the ringleader of this whole nest." "Do you, now?" the vampire said, sounding amused. With this whole speech full of silver-tongued, philosophical bullcrap. "Yeah, I do," said Dean. "I absolutely believe you've spent a century or two sinking your hooks into some down-on-their-luck but probably quite decent people to make yourself a little army of bloodsuckers. Brainwashing them into thinking this life is better than the one they had. And I think that's all you can do." The vampire slowly raised its eyebrows and cocked its head. Inwardly, Dean was pleased to see it was battling the anger it felt at the hunter's words and veiling it poorly by pretending to be surprised and interested. He succeeded in keeping his tone calm and cool, too. "Is that so? Why else would you have this big of a nest?" Dean presented his evidence. 7 little friends. Many hands make light work, or in this case, no work for you. You just sit on your lazy, cowardly, vampire ass, and let your troop do your bidding so the blood goes in your fangs instead of on your hands." With this statement, Dean got the vampire's smile to finally fade into a grimace of hatred. And he didn't mind. If his manipulation was a bit of a stretch, this vamp had been a hell of a handful in a fight. But too much rage could get any opponent to make mistakes. So Dean pressed harder. "You call yourself a lion. Why don't you finally, for once in your immortal life, put your money where your mouth is?" He readied himself for the onslaught. "Come on," the vampire charged, and the rest was a vicious exchange of blows, both of them getting in several good hits. Some rotted items got licked pretty solidly, too, clattering metallically across the floor or shattering into several dozen splinters. A number of moments Dean nearly took the vamp's head off, and a time or two Dean just about got fangs sunk into him. The turning point was when Dean got clocked and reeled backwards into another vampire who was fleeing down the hall. They knocked each other to the floor. Dean leapt back to his feet as fast as he could, and the other scrambled up in a panic. Then the newcomer and the nest's king turned and faced Dean, who paused to carefully assess this new combo of opponents. The nest leader smiled malevolently. "Not feeling so confident now, are you?" Dean glanced at the new vamp, whose face was a mask of absolute terror. "Still doing okay, actually." And he felt even better when Sam and Jenna burst through the door on the west end of the hall. They were obviously the ones who had pursued the new vampire to this area. Because when it turned to look at the two, his fright reached its maximum and he sprinted in the opposite direction toward the door Dean had recently demolished against his will. The nest leader took advantage of the distraction and lunged at Dean, snagging his machete arm. The elder Winchester socked the vampire in the face with his free hand. "Dean," Sam shouted as he streaked toward them. "Go, I've got this one," Dean instructed. Sam and Jenna darted past as Dean and the nest leader struggled toward the wall. They were almost to the opposite end when the IGHTH vampire they didn't know it was actually the ninth sprung out of a service door and tackled Sam. Jenna gave a squeak of surprise and fear, dodging the two as they fell. "Get the other one," Sam yelled as he fended off the new vamp. Using the surprising speed and agility the large amount of power in her tiny body afforded her, Jenna wove around the grappling hunter and vampire within a few seconds and was off after their original quarry. Sam had to wrestle viciously against the vampire atop him, and at one point he nearly got his carotid tapped. He managed to get the best of his opponent, just in time to glimpse the last spare seconds of his brother's fight. At this point, Dean and the nest leader were locked in a grapple against the back wall, both of them trying to use the surface as leverage. And neither of them quite able to get the upper hand. "You've got me, huh?" the king said, panting with the effort of sustaining the grip in his footing as Dean resisted. The hunter just stared down the vampire, avoiding a reply because at the moment he wasn't so sure of the answer. The way they were positioned, either one of them could tip the tables. And the vampire knew it, too. So the king said, "I don't think so." And though Dean tried to counter the force, there was only so much a human could do against the strength of a supernatural being, and he was hurled through the ancient railing and into the mill room pit. Sam's yell echoed after him, "Dean." Dean's fall was slowed when his side hit the edge of the immense granite millstone 2/3 of the way down. Nevertheless, he impacted both the stone and the concrete floor hard. His descent completed, he rolled sluggishly on the ground, assessing the damage and trying to recover as quickly as he could. Most everything hurt, but his ribs where he had collided with the corner were definitely the worst. By far. In fact, he was pretty sure some of them were broken. And when finally he attempted his first full breath, he stopped sharply as a searing white-hot pain spread through the entire right side of his chest from a very specific point within the injured area. Almost immediately after the breath, he suddenly felt a sensation of drowning. He rolled to his left and braced with a hand as he reflexively coughed violently, eliciting an even more severe flash of agony. What came out of his mouth was a spray of blood, and then he knew some lance of a shattered rib had punctured his lung. And that was when the vampire landed in the mill room, not 20 feet away from him. Up above, Sam made to chase after his brother and the vampire who was looking to finish him off. But at that moment he heard Jenna scream. He whipped around so fast his hair fanned with the motion. He felt a horrific tearing sensation in his mind and chest as he suddenly had to make a split-second decision between his brother who had just fallen 20 feet into he didn't know what, or the young, green hunter he was tasked with protecting on her first nest raid. He ran to aid Jenna. He knew Dean would have done the same. Meanwhile, Dean was clawing his way to his feet, trying to keep his torso as immobile as possible and failing. Every movement was torture, and he couldn't breathe for both the pain and the new flood of blood that raced into his lung with each breath. He made for the machete that had fallen several feet away from him, doubled over. The vampire was there before Dean could get very far. He threw a solid kick into Dean's side. Luckily, it was his intact side, but it still brought him tumbling to the ground. He writhed slightly as he rolled over his broken ribs onto his back. And that was when the vampire happened upon his injury, planting another kick into Dean's chest. Dean shouted at the strike, too immobilized by the pain. He remained prone when he coughed up another fount of blood. It ran down his face, and back into his throat to choke and gag him. Said the vampire coolly. "Here you thought I was the one who was all talk. Seems you've got the mouth that's bigger than your muscles." Dean cast about for something to grab and throw, or a place to roll away, something to kick that might loose an object the vampire would have to dodge. Anything that would give him enough time to at least get to his feet. But he found nothing. He was positioned too closely to the millstone. "You know," the vampire continued, "I am pretty hungry, and I can smell the O-negative coming off you mph, sweet. But," and he sank his foot down on top of Dean's shattered ribs. "Gah," Dean bellowed, grabbing hold of the vampire's pant leg, though he couldn't summon enough strength to push the limb off him. "I think I'm going to have to just off you. I don't have time to eat since you're brainwashed follow. Wers are going after my brainwashed followers. So, hold the phone please." The nest leader stepped off, strode to Dean's fallen machete and hoisted the blade before he returned. Dean took the moment to try and stand. He failed. Between the blinding pain and the dizziness from lack of oxygen, he was hardly able to prop himself up on his arms by the time the vamp had returned. "Unfortunately, this probably won't hurt much," said the vampire. He swung the blade up overhead. Dean would have tried to roll away, but the millstone was at his back. Plus, he was fairly certain that even if he had had the room to maneuver, he wouldn't be able to move fast enough to evade the strike. So he prepared to die again, and hoped his daughter and brother were safe somewhere in the nest, and wished he could have said goodbye to them. And Jenna, too, she was edging her way onto the list of people he cared about the most. And he hated the thought that he wouldn't be there if any of them needed him. But he knew he had no way out, so he faced his doom and watched as the machete came down. And as his vision faded, it was invaded by a swath of beige, and Castiel grabbed the nest leader's wielding hand before it could descend more than a foot. The vampire's expression was a mask of shock as he stared into the angel's face. He didn't get much of a chance to take in the image, as Castiel quickly placed his palm on the creature's forehead and the light of heaven shone out the vampire's eyes and mouth. He screamed, then crumpled to the floor, smoking slightly. "Saws," Dean called out with relief, collapsing onto his back. "Glad you dropped in to save my sorry ass." "I didn't come here to save you," said Castiel calmly as he turned around to Dean. "You certainly needed it, though. You look awful." "Thanks," replied Dean, grimacing. Every word a struggle. "I feel worse." "Here." Castiel knelt down next to Dean and placed his first 2 fingers on the Winchester's forehead. Even though he had been caught in the throes of his injury for only a minute or two, the relief of suddenly being able to take a full, steady breath without searing pain and asphyxiation was profound, and he gasped. "That never gets old," he told Castiel, his voice ragged. "I'm sure there will come a time when you will beg me to let you die," replied Saws. Dean gave him a bewildered look. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," Castiel grumbled. "Weird day." "Come on." The angel hauled Dean to his feet. "Weird, huh?" said Dean, now upright. "Is that why you stopped by? Needed things to make more and less sense all at once?" "Not necessarily," replied Castiel. "I came to." "Dean," Sam's voice shouted from above, making the two look up. "Saws." "Hello, Sam," Castiel replied. "You're all right," said Sam. "I am now," said Dean. "We got some extra backup." "Good," said Sam. "I came to tell you that." Saws began again, but was once more cut off. "Oh, hey, Saws." Jenna appeared at Sam's elbow. "Thank God you're here. This place is terrifying. Have you seen all these vampires? And they're so strong. And fast. Like, I knew they were strong and fast, but you get here on the day and holy crap, it's way worse than you imagine. But what brought you here, ah?" As Jenna rambled, Castiel's patience reached its limit. He growled slightly, pinching his lips together, and without bothering to look over, roughly grabbed a handful of Dean's jacket at the shoulder. Then they were on the catwalk beside Sam and Jenna, startling the latter. "All right, is this all of you?" Castiel snapped. "Except Alex and Andy," said Dean. "Well, if they're not done by now. They must need help," said Castiel, turning and heading toward the front entry. "I'd like to tell you all at once, I'm in a bit of a hurry." "Oh no," and Castiel stopped in his tracks, staring at nothing. "Saws," Dean barked anxiously. "What is it?" The angel didn't bother to turn around. "You're going to be mad at me." Then he marched off into the next room. "Saws," Dean called after him. "Saws," and they strode after the trench-coated figure. Alex hit the ground, rolling over a shoulder and tumbling along the concrete. She barely managed to regain her footing when the vampire was on her again, swiping and slashing furiously. A rapid reaction of blocks kept her from getting hammered about the head, but her arms were solidly bruised within seconds. She finally managed to grapple her assailant and heave him around toward the ground. He landed hard and stilled for a moment. It gave Alex time enough to retrieve her lost machete. Upon hoisting the weapon, she darted CK to the vampire and made to cleave off his head. But he jumped at his last opportunity to attack and sent a kick into her right hip. "Gah!" Alex shouted at the blow. It was part frustration, part surprise that made her yell. But the pain that she felt with the impact seemed excessive, and that startled her the most. Why did it ache so much? She even fell to the ground, landing on her other hip. So offset was she from the unexpectedness of it. She paused to check herself for blood, wondering if the vampire had something sharp on his boot that had impaled her. It hurt that bad, but there was no wound, no blood, not even swelling. And in her brief lapse, the vampire leapt on top of her. Alex did her best to counter his attack, trying to redirect his momentum. They ended up rolling, first Alex gaining the upper hand, then the vampire, then Alex again. Finally she set her legs in such a way that the vamp couldn't budge her again in either direction, and she was able to press down on him. An incredible amount of force for a mortal human. Pinned beneath her oppressive hold, he roared with rage and frustration and maybe grief. He locked his eyes on hers as he bellowed, and his fangs slowly contracted out of his gum line. If Alex had fangs, hers would have appeared, too, she was so enraged by this creature. And then, suddenly, all of her anger drained away. Because as she stared daggers at the vampire, she recognized the lines of green that ran through the irises of his light brown eyes. She still bore down on him with all of her strength, and although it kept him immobile, Hat was no longer her conscious intention. She was frozen in shock and her body took over on instinct. She asked, "Matt," and as soon as she posed the question, recognition came over his face, too. His fangs retracted, and his anger dissolved as quickly as hers had. Suddenly he didn't look so monstrous. "Alex?" he asked. They stared at each other. For a long time, and all else faded into nothing. And even their thoughts lost their words, turned only to the sensations of confusion, and anger, and joy, and sorrow. Then, slowly, Alex released her long-lost adopted brother and stood and backed away. "You were missing," Alex began. "You were missing. For a really long time." Her voice broke. "You were missing for a really long time and we thought you were gone." Gone. Matt sat on the floor, watching Alex as tears ran down her cheeks. She was huge. His little sister was his little sister. She had changed so much and was almost, kind of, scary. He'd gotten used to being a vampire. Being magically stronger than everyone but the other vampires. He'd even been in tousles with hunters before, though he hated to admit it, and had still managed to evade them fairly easily. But fighting Alex just now had been terrifying. He had felt certain his immortal life was over. Never had he met anyone who fought that ferociously and leveraged that much power while still being human. He used to catch her with a huge bear hug when they played tag and hold on while she laughed and laughed. And he had had no problem keeping her captive until finally she sincerely asked to be set free. But he knew why she was like this. He had known her father and uncle eradicated the supernatural. Their arrival to rid his parents' house of a poltergeist was why he had a sister at all. But he had no idea who they really were until the other vampires told him what a threat the Winchesters were to their kind. To what he had become. "I was gone," he told her, finally finding his voice, though he was quiet. "Not gone, not dead, but I might as well be." Alex's breathing became heavy, not from the exertion of their fight, but from the intensity of her emotions. What do you mean? Matt, being a vampire's not the end, it doesn't have to be." "Look what you just did to my entire nest," Matt broke in intently. "It is the end. This is the end. It was always going to be the end." "No," Alex disagreed, and suddenly that desperate, delicate emotion he knew so well in her showed through. No, that's not true. I don't know," and then her anger returned, and that he knew well, too. "Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you ask for our help? Why do you think?" Matt replied, "I know what your family does. What they trained you to do. And I knew what they would have to do to me. And I was ashamed, Alex. I didn't want you to know, I didn't want any of you to know what I had become, that I was the scum of the earth that you and your dad and uncle were always working to wipe out." It was Matt's turn to streak his face with tears. "You're not scum," Alex protested, her voice rising in pitch. "You're my brother. You're my family, Matt." "No," Matt said sadly. "I'm not. And I haven't been for a long time. Now I'm just your enemy." "No," Alex shouted at him. "Do it, Alex," said Matt. "What?" Alex sobbed. "Do it," and Matt came to his knees in front of her. "Do what you do, what hunters do. Please put me out of my misery." Alex stared at him in horror, gasping for breath, until she overcame her shock and bellowed at him, "Are you fucking kidding me?" "My nest is gone," said Matt. "I'm alone and I have nowhere to go. Finish the job you all came here to do. Kill me." Alex's face twisted in grief as she looked down on her brother. Her adoptive parents had been absolute saints, and even they couldn't hold a candle to their son. Even in her earliest memories of him, he had been kind and compassionate and affectionate whenever she needed him to be. There had been 2 instances of playground bullies when they were growing up. The first time, Alex had been knocked down and Matt had run to comfort her, his first instinct being to care for her. The second time, they were older, and Matt had been pinned on the ground by an older boy. Alex had kicked the crap out of that bully until he ran away crying, too startled by the sudden attack to mount a defense. Then she had turned to help Matt to his feet. And while he could have easily been the bruiser in both situations, he had always chosen the gentler solution. He was the most loving soul she had ever met. And the death of their parents would have been unbearable if he hadn't been at her side. And now she was supposed to behead him. It was then that Castiel entered the room, followed closely by Dean, Sam, and Jenna. They saw the dead vampires, they saw Andy on the floor pale but still clearly living, and they saw Alex standing over a young man they could only assume was a vampire. And then they saw Alex hurl her machete into the corner of the room, where it crashed with a cacophonous, ear-splitting clanging and clattering into the metal of the beams and the concrete of the floor. "Alex!" Dean shouted and darted to her side, his weapon at the ready. But he didn't realize Alex would be the one to attack him. She turned toward her father, revealing her tear-soaked face. Immediately he was run through with fear and sympathy, as well as confusion. Then he was practically just run through as his daughter shoved him in the chest as hard as her grief-stricken body could. It sent him stumbling backwards a few steps. "I told you we had to look for him," she shrieked. "What, Alex?" Dean barked back, feeling he should be angry at her for this behavior, but no one. In his gut she would only rebuke him so if she had a very good reason. "Jenna, go check on Andy," Sam told the young woman in an undertone before he turned to join his brother and niece. Jenna nodded, her eyes wide with surprise and confusion. She turned to jog toward the fallen hunter, even though she was struggling to rip her eyes from her best friend and Dean. She had never seen Alex this emotional. "I told you we had to look for him. And you said there was no point. You said he was gone." Alex berated him. "Alex, what are you talking about?" Dean asked, completely befuddled. "And now he's a vampire," Alex continued, sobbing. "Who's a vampire?" Dean felt a very tight grip on his jacket shoulder, and he looked to see his brother had come to his side. But Sam wasn't looking at him or Alex. His gaze was fixed on the man still kneeling on the floor in front of him, and there was the most terrible melancholy in the younger Winchester's eyes. "Dean," Sam repeated, "it's Matt." "Matt," Dean parroted back, but then his breath caught as the pieces came together. "Matt Hurstwine," said Sam. And then Dean finally looked at the vampire who watched them quietly, patiently. While it took him some time to fill in the years, there was no mistaking the boy who had begged Dean to take Alex home with him, so she'd be safe, so she'd be loved, so she'd have a good life, even if he might never see his sister again. "Hi, Sam," said Matt weakly. "Hi, Dean." Sam could barely summon the strength to speak. "Hey, kid." Dean didn't have time to say all the things he wished to say to the boy he had abandoned. Because at that moment he had to round on saws. "Oh, I am mad at you." He said it quietly and simply, but it was clear shit had hit the fan. Dean's face had gone still with anger. And he stalked toward Castiel as he stared daggers into him. "You told me," he growled, "he was dead." If anyone could meet this level of Dean's murderous rage with the softest look of sorrow and regret, it was Castiel. Tilting his head as he frowned compassionately. "That is not what I said," the angel replied, his voice gentle and sad. "Oh, it's not, is it?" Dean snapped back. "Then why don't you remind me exactly what you said?" Quote, blank, underscore, blank. Dean paced in his bedroom, his hands buried in his hair, or gripping the back of his skull as he hung his head, or scrubbing at his face. She just wouldn't stop crying. Even when she put on a brave face, the tears were right behind her fake smile. And it took so little to send her back into her sobs. Dean felt no irritation about it, none. But it put a lance through his heart every time she started up again, just from knowing how much she was suffering. And he felt so helpless in his attempts to ease her pain, because it seemed like nothing worked. Surely she was doing better than if she hadn't had his consolation. But it certainly didn't feel that way. So he sat down on the end of his bed, and rested his forearms limply on his knees. And hung his head. A tear escaped his eye and he had to sniff. He just wished he hadn't told her there was no hope, hadn't made things so final, that maybe if she clung to some faint fantasy, however unrealistic, that she might not feel her grief this intensely. So he shut his eyes and did as she had suggested. "I pray to the angel Castiel to offer help and guidance in my time of need, our time of need," said Dean. He opened his eyes to inspect the empty of his room. "Are you there, Saws?" The brothers were still getting used to Castiel having his wings back, and his often sudden appearances were once again making them jump, just as they had over a decade ago. But Dean knew the angel was coming, and the flutter of his wings was quiet and melodic, and he alighted so carefully on the bed next to Dean that he hardly disturbed the blanket. "Hello, Dean." "Hey, Saws," replied Dean. "You look sad," Saws observed. "Yeah, I'm sad," Dean nodded. "Because my daughter's sad. Sadder, even." "What happened?" Castiel asked. "Is she all right?" Yeah, she's fine, just grieving, said Dean, looking down. Alex's adopted brother, Matt, has gone missing. For a few months now. And I told her. Just then Dean had to laugh bitterly and run a hand over his face. I'm such an ass. I told her that he was probably dead. Well, he probably is if he's been missing this long, said Castiel. I know. But said Dean, and huffed a sigh in frustration. She's been bawling on and off for a day and a half. And I know she's doing as well as she is because I'm doing my best to help her through it. But I just hate that I had to tell her that there was no hope. Then he had to shake his head and turn his heart a little harder. And I did it because I knew she needed to just get through it. That stringing her along with the idea that he was out there somewhere, squirreled away doing God knows what with God knows who, would have done nothing but torture her even more and in far worse ways. She needed a real, solid answer. But I know there's a chance. Even if it's a slim chance. And damn it, Saws, I just need to do my due diligence. You're wondering if I can see him, Saws made the leap. Can you do that favor for an old friend? Dean asked. Just a quick recon to see if he really is dead. Yes, of course, said Castiel. And he turned his gaze away. Seemingly into nothing when it was actually the vastness of the cosmos. He held steady for a few moments, searching. Dean watched him, letting himself have the tiniest glimmer of hope more than he should have, as well he knew. And when he saw Castiel blink slowly, sadly, and heard his resigned sigh, the light went out. Kid's a goner, huh? He asked. Castiel replied with solemnity, Matt Hurstwine is indeed beyond our help. Dean looked away and cast his gaze down. Figures. Well, at least I didn't ruin her weekend for no reason. I just wish, his words became breathless, I just wish she didn't have to deal with this. She cries so hard, sometimes I worry she's gonna hurt herself just from sobbing. Would you like me to remove Matt from her memories? Saws offered. Dean glanced at the angel, honestly considering the option for a few seconds. Then he shook his head. No, would you pull Sam from mine? If you asked me to, said Castiel. Dean could just barely smile. Well, Essence said she wished she could forget him yet, so. Is there a body we can retrieve? To bury, give her not to mention the rest of her family some closure. Castiel shook his head. No, there is not. What was done to Matt was cruel and unjust. I would not go looking for what remains. Dean nodded with amazement and anger. Well, that sucks, he growled. So not what he deserved. He was such a good kid, Saws. He should have had a really long, happy life. And instead he gets. He threw up a hand irritably. It's not fair. No, agreed Castiel. I am sorry, Dean. It's okay, said Dean. Thanks for looking anyway. You're welcome, said Saws. Perhaps you could have some kind of memorial. Yeah, Dean acknowledged, looking into the distance and slowly becoming more thoughtful. Yeah, some kind of memorial. Blank. Dean sighed wearily, irritably, shutting his eyes and tilting his head back. Not cool, dude, he said to the angel. Dean, he had long since been turned. And if I had told you he was a vampire, you would have tried to save him, insisted Castiel. We know that there is no cure once he had drunk human blood, but you would have tried to find a way anyway. Researched for a cure until you could no longer see straight, and we both know you certainly don't need any more of that. Though his face was calm and clear, Dean looked Saws dead in the eye and pointed a finger at him. Saying sharply, don't even go there. Castiel looked frustrated, huffing through his nose. Dean didn't bother to push the subject further, there was no point in arguing. And he wouldn't admit it not for a while, but Saws was right. He would have tried far too long and far too hard to save Matt, and nothing would have come of it. And he was about to do it anyway. When Dean turned around, he saw the change in the scene. Matt still knelt on the floor and he looked absolutely lost. His gaze, though never focusing fully, seemed to wander back and forth between the conversations before him. Because while Dean had been getting the untwisted truth from Castiel, Sam had been talking down Alex. It had taken a lot of coaxing from her uncle, but finally she had owed him to apologize and wrap her up in his arms as she shook with quiet sobs. Dean would have to make reparations with his daughter later. Right now, the person who stood the most alone in the room was Matt. So Dean stepped forward. Matt, I am so sorry, he said, and the young vampire finally actually settled his focus, looking up at Dean. I made a rash decision assuming you were a goner, and the jackass behind me. He jabbed a thumb over his shoulder at Castiel, who rolled his eyes at the comment, knows I have a habit of making rash decisions, so he told me half a truth to keep me from going out and finding you and making an even bigger mess of your life than it already was just to try and turn you human again. Dean paused a moment as the sadness and the anger boiled up. And as much of a shit show as that would have been, it was still a huge mistake not coming out and looking for you. Matt took in the apology, and he looked grateful for it, but his instinct seemed to be to brush it off, to lessen the offense. So he looked away and barely shook his head. It's okay, he said. Being a vampire, it's scary to start and I knew I had been made into a monster, but my nest wasn't so bad. Are you friggin' kidding me? Dean said, taking another step to accent his sentiments. He pointed off toward the mill room. I just got my ass handed to me by the twisted son of a bitch who ran this whole nest. And let me tell you, he was a piece of work. I know the kind of mind games he played, and he used those to make you a vampire and then keep you here. No, Matt, whatever you went through, you deserved better. No, I didn't, Matt breathed as he spilled a fresh tear. Yes, you did, Dean insisted. Hey, and he traversed the last 10 feet to the young man, came to a knee in front of him, and reached out to take a firm hold of his head at the base of his skull. Matt was surprised and a little scared, but he didn't pull away as Dean's eyes bored into him. You listen to me, you are a good kid, and you did not deserve to be turned into a friggin' vampire. And I should have looked for you. I should have done what your sister told me to do and looked for you. Matt's tears flowed more and more freely as Dean spoke, and when his last words faded, the youth finally let out a sob and buried his face in his hands. Dean reached around his shoulders and pulled him in close to comfort him. What are you going to do with me? Matt finally asked. Whatever I can, said Dean, releasing the young man to look at him. It might not be much, but we'll just have to figure it out as we go. But I know one thing for sure, 'cause it's the thing you always need, and I'm not leaving without it. What? Matt inquired. That nest king of yours is lying down in the bottom of the mill room, burnt out by an angel, said Dean, and I'm gonna go pilfer about a pint of that dick's blood. And with that, the eldest Winchester stood and marched back the way he had come. He left behind a thoroughly bewildered Matt. Additionally, Saws tried to waylay him. Dean, I need to tell you. Talk to Sam, Dean bit back without stopping or looking at Castiel. The trench-coated man sighed, and turned back toward the rest of the Winchesters. Did he say an angel killed Marcus? Matt asked him. Marcus was your nest leader. Castiel requested clarification. Yes, said Matt. Then yes, replied Castiel. There are angels, said Matt, baffled. Yes, Saws repeated. You saw it down in the mill room. No, I am one, said Castiel. That was me. I burned the soul out of your nest leader. Sorry. Oh, said Matt, pure amazement plastered across his face. There are angels. There are angels. You're an angel. Holy crap. Oh, sorry. Castiel looked confused. For what? For using holy like that, Matt mumbled. And he was clearly quite terrified of the repercussions. Honestly, none of us care about that, Castiel said casually. Instead he turned toward Sam and Alex. Sam, Alex, you need to be aware. That makes so much sense, Matt said thoughtfully under his breath, though it was loud enough to distract Castiel. The angel finally lost his temper. Would you all please shut up and let me say my thing? Matt's eyes went wide, staring in shocked silence at this sudden reprimand from the divine being he had just learned existed. Sam, on the other hand, had spent far too much time with Castiel to be surprised or frightened, and he almost laughed at the angel's outburst. He said kindly, Sorry, Saws. Why are you here? It is kind of odd for you to pop in on a routine hunt. Castiel, relieved, finally spoke. I'm leaving for a while. Sam looked at him with concern. What do you mean, leaving? For you to leave, and have to tell us about it, it must be really damn far. There are issues in heaven at the moment, Castiel elaborated. There are usually issues in heaven, Saws, Sam came back. These are different. I'm going to be gone for a while, and I cannot explain why yet, said the angel. Heaven, Matt's query came from the floor. We'll catch you up in a minute, Matt, okay. Sam said reassuringly. Matt just nodded vaguely. I'll be out of contact, in the deepest recesses of heaven. Castiel continued. So if you need help I won't be available. I won't even be able to hear prayers. Okay, but what if you need help? Sam countered. If I need help in heaven, I will be beyond all help. Said Castiel. Saws, Sam sighed. Just try to stay out of trouble, okay? Real trouble. said Castiel. I'd hate to come back to a puddle of Winchester goo. Now Sam actually gave a sniff of a laugh. We'll do our best, he said. All right, Saws grumbled, finally satisfied his message had gotten across. He's helped you before, too, said Matt. All three of them looked over at the young man. None of them quite understood what he had said or why he had said it. What do you mean? Asked Alex. I recognize him now, said Matt. I mean, I kind of recognized him before. But I thought I was being stupid, but now, knowing he's an angel, it makes sense. I know him. He saved us. Alex stared at her brother, taking a few steps toward him as she asked, what? When we were kids, Matt answered. He pulled us out of the road. Alex gave a slight gasp. Oh, I remember that. We were little, Matt added. Well, you were little, like 6. I was 8, I should have known not to chase the ball into the road. But we were having too much fun and it bounced so fast, and so did you and someone pulled us back, said Alex. Big, brown SUV bearing down on us. We'd have been flattened, said Matt. I never saw who saved us, said Alex. I kinda thought it was you who grabbed me. No, Matt shook his head. Then he looked at Castiel, gesturing to him. It was him. I mean, I didn't get a good look at him, he was there and gone in an instant, but dark hair, stubble, the trench coat, and he's an angel. Matt gave a breath of joyous disbelief. Alex turned to Saws. How did you know we were in trouble? Alex asked. I didn't call for you. I wouldn't have known to call for you back then, or even had time to in that situation. It was pretty obvious you were about to be killed, said Castiel. You were watching me, said Alex. Yes, of course, said Castiel. But why? Alex asked. I hadn't started hunting, or was even around Dad and Uncle Sam. Why were you watching me? I'm always watching over you, Alex, said Saws. Since your life began. Oh, Alex said meekly. She had been very, very angry at the angel this evening, having overheard enough of Castiel and Dean's conversation to know he had intentionally hidden her living brother from her. But suddenly she found it extremely hard to be mad at him. Saws wasn't exactly a raw nerve of love and affection, and sometimes what he did express seemed almost fake to her, it was so awkward and even childish at times. But this knowledge, this statement, he loved her. He really, really cared. Just like the rest of her family, he was ever ready to be present for her if she needed him, even if this was the first she really knew of it. Thanks, Saws. You're welcome, said Castiel calmly. Then Alex couldn't help but scratch awkwardly at the hairs at the base of her skull and squeeze one eye shut. You're always watching me. Don't worry, you have your privacy, Castiel reassured her. Alex laughed with relief. Okay, cool. It's not necessarily like watching TV constantly, anyway, he added. More of an awareness. Good to know. Then she laughed again, this time with amazement. Wow, you're like my real-life guardian angel. This whole time and I didn't even know it. Well, I'm your father's and your uncle's, as well, Castiel conceded. You were a logical addition. They have to call me, though. They're what's the term Dean uses? He turned toward Sam. Grown-ass men. Sam had to snort a laugh. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes, they're grown-ass men who neigh to get themselves out of the trouble they cause, Castiel continued. You're still you were an infant, and then a child, and now you're far more capable but still new to a lot of the world. So I keep a closer eye. Human infants are quite useless, you know, he added offhandedly, making Alex bark a laugh. They're very floppy and have practically no sense of self-preservation. If you don't hold their head right, they break their neck. It was hard not to watch over you in your first few years. And I certainly wasn't going to let you get run over by a car at age 6. As Alex recovered from her laughter, she couldn't help but give the angel a warm smile. I do appreciate it, she said. Man, it's so crazy to think that time you saved me in Louisiana wasn't the first, it was years before that. What time in Louisiana? Dean's voice came from the back wall, having just returned with a flask full of vampire blood. 3 of the occupants of the room froze in horror, Alex, Castiel, and Sam. Had they really just let it slip what had happened that time? Dean was too sick to hunt, so they drugged him and Alex and Sam went off on their own, and she nearly died with a piece of glass in her carotid that Castiel healed. And they all swore to never say a single word of the whole mess to Dean. Oops. After several seconds of dead silence, and his inspection of the petrified look in their eyes, and the fact that they didn't dare turn their gazes toward him, Dean started to get the sense of what was going on. His brow furrowed, and his voice grew loud, and insistent, and angry. What time in Louisiana? Okay, Dean, don't get too upset, Sam started. Don't get too upset. Dean came back, his tone so quiet and even that it was terrifying to hear. Look at her. She's fine, Sam triaged, gesturing towards his niece. Saz was there in time, it was just for a moment. Sam, Dean prompted his brother to explain the actual events. Okay, it was the time you had that really bad fever, said Sam. Dean's eyebrows shot up. Oh, the time you drugged me and ran off on a hunt with my daughter. Dean elaborated. It was a routine hunt. Yeah, clearly. Sam let out a heavy breath, rough his nose to calm himself and continued more steadily. It was a routine hunt, we were fighting the ghost while we tried to torch the grave. Alex got pushed through a window. She got a piece of glass in her neck, she bled a little. Saz patched her up good as new. Okay, that's it, Dean parroted, his voice still menacingly low. Piece of glass in her neck and she bled a little. Sam gave the tiniest pause before he said, yeah, but his eyes flicked downward for a split second as he spoke, and Dean knew he was still hiding something. But he didn't need to read his brother's expressions to know that. And he knew why. But she bled enough that you called for Saz, Dean pressed. Before Sam could bring himself to agree, the elder added, so I'm guessing this was a pretty piece of glass and it was in a pretty bad place. Now Sam didn't just look scared, or secretive, but ashamed, like a child caught misbehaving. Yeah, he said, so she almost died, and finally Dean's voice rose in volume. And all three of you hid it from me. Look, Dean, I'm sorry, Sam began. Well, isn't this just great, everybody's hiding a bunch of really important life or death events from me. Dean grumbled as he tucked the flask of blood into his jacket pocket, and from that point on he didn't look at any of them. Matt's not dead, he's a vampire, and my daughter had her throat slit while her uncle watched. Good to finally know. Dean, Sam tried again. All right, job's done here, Dean shouted to the whole group. Let's pack it up. Dad, Alex finally found her voice and took a tentative step toward Dean. Get your brother, he responded, gesturing toward Matt. We're going. Dean, Saz began. Shut up, Dean snapped. I'm leaving for a while, Castiel insisted. Good, said Dean without even looking at the angel as he walked away, making a brief stop by Jenna and Andy to be sure she could drive the injured hunter back to his hotel room. Castiel sighed and turned back to Sam, Alex, and Matt. I have to go, he said regretfully, wearily. Stay safe. You, too, said Sam. Matt blinked and then had to shake his head and look around with an intake of breath. Because suddenly the angel was nowhere to be found. Alex walked over to him and offered a hand up. How'd he just disappear like that? He asked. He got his wings back the last time he was resurrected, said Alex. Come on, we gotta go. Your dad seems okay, said Matt as he rose. He's not even yelling that much. Trust me, said Alex. This is worse. The drive home was long and quite horrible and exhausting. There were no overnight stays at random motels on this trip. Dean drove non-stop back to the bunker. Almost. They made one detour. A blood bank. Matt had been seated behind Dean, with Sam in the back to keep an eye on the young vampire, while Alex and Jenna took the passenger and the middle of the front bench respectively. The latter was exceedingly uncomfortable, as she LD practically feel the heat of silent rage radiating off of Dean. But she was certainly the person he was the least angry at right now, and who also wasn't a vampire. But eventually Sam broke the silence. Dean, nope, said Dean immediately. Dean, we're not talking about it, Sam. We're going to have to at some point, said Sam. So you want to do that now instead of someplace where you can ice your face afterward? Dean came back. Sam's jaw locked and his gaze became malicious, but he stayed silent and looked away. Dean didn't see, nor did he care. He kept driving. As Sam was preoccupied himself with anything other than his brother, he caught sight of Matt starting to fidget. It had been more than 3 hours since they had left the nest, and most of that time spent in tense, dead silence. Hey, Sam said quietly to the young man. You okay? Yeah, said Matt, too reassuringly. Yeah, I'm fine, just, are you, Sam ventured, hungry? Matt glanced around the cab, a little shamefaced, and nodded shyly. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice sounded tight, like he might cry. It's okay, said Sam quickly. It's okay, we'll get you something to eat. No, it's not that kind of, Matt continued. And it was clear it was causing him terrible pain to have to clarify he was in need of blood. No, I know, Sam continued. It's okay, who wants to knock off a blood bank? Dean casually asked the car at large. Alex, can you find us a nice, big hospital nearby? Alex glanced over a little nervously, because Sam usually did this kind of research and navigation, but apparently Dean was angrier at him than at her. So she nodded and pulled out her phone while her uncle tucked his back into his pocket. Yeah, okay, she agreed, a little more lightly than the situation CALLED for and a little more meekly than she usually spoke. You're going to steal blood? Matt asked incredulously. It's better than killing someone, said Dean. Huh, said Matt. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And is kind of clever. Thank you. You're not the first vamp we've hauled around, said Dean. Blank, underscore, blank. Parked in a distant corner of the hospital's lot, Sam opened the trunk, threw on an EMT's jacket, and grabbed a cooler, citing he was the only one of them who had the appropriate cover packed and ready. The others got out to stretch their legs and wait for his return. Dean leaned against the Impala as his brother turned to leave. Yeah, Sam better make the run, Dean commented, his voice low and snide. What with him being so good at lying and all? Sam was several feet away when he heard the jab. He stopped in his tracks, fuming. Though his back was turned and he was bulkily clothed, Alex still recognized the rage-induced tension throughout his entire body. Nevertheless, Sam managed to satiate his homicidal thoughts with a deep breath. Then he marched off. The rest of them waited a while in the aftermath, quiet, anxious, but still glad to be out in the open instead of cooped up in the car. Finally, Alex got up the courage to approach her father, though she stayed a good distance away. You're really mad at us, huh? She broached the subject. No, I'm really mad at him. Dean jabbed an accusatory finger at the hospital Sam had just entered. I'm just mad at. Really, said Alex. I mean, we all kept the secret. You were 16, Dean said evenly. Which is old enough to know better than to hide something like this, but he was responsible for you, he should have known better than to lie about you getting hurt. Hell, he shouldn't have gone hunting alone with you at all. We didn't want you to worry, said Alex. We knew you'd be upset. Yeah, well, look how that worked out for you, Dean stared her down. Lex gave a reluctant twitch of one side of her mouth to concede his point. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. We should have told you. Yeah, you should have. Dean came back, but his tone was starting to soften even if his expression was still intense. After a moment's pause, he added, You know it's my job to worry about you. Alex dared to jest, Really? I thought you were a hunter. She gave him a playful smile as she tilted briefly to the side, her hands clasped tight behind her back. Dean couldn't smile back, but neither could he resist the tiniest breath of a laugh at both her gall and her humor in spite of the situation. He shook his head and looked off at nothing for a beat. If anything like that ever happens again, you're telling me right away. Got it, Dean instructed her, insistent but not unkind. Got it, said Alex. "'Kay, good," said Dean, coming off the car. "I'm sorry. It's okay, baby girl," said Dean as he traversed the short distance between them and wrapped her up in a hug. She hugged him back, and he could tell that she was tired and stressed. They both seemed to relax, though. The relief of their conflict now being resolved at least between Alex and Dean came out of her in a breathy sigh. And Dean was glad of the respite, spending a calm moment with his daughter threw water on his burning rage. It didn't entirely douse the flames, though. He was still angry at Sam. And he wasn't going to let that go anytime soon. But that was a problem to deal with later. Right now, he asked, "Were you scared?" "A little," replied Alex, knowing nothing would do except complete honesty. "It was only for a few seconds, though. I wasn't down long at all." Alex was very relaxed now, still wrapped up in her father's arms. She'd been so tight, everything clenched for hours at this point. What with the raid and all the adrenaline that came with it. Now it drained away, and she was relaxed, almost too relaxed. Was it getting darker out? Maybe a cloud was going over the moon. But over the parking lot lights, too. "Alex," Dean asked as he felt her ever so slowly begin to sag in his grasp. "Hey, Alex," and then her head lolled on his shoulder and her arms fell from around his waist. "Whoa whoa whoa, okay, hey," he said, panicked, as he carefully but quickly knelt to lay her on the ground. She had completely lost consciousness. Dean's heart was in his throat. Alex. Jenna and Matt had done their best to avoid eavesdropping, but they snapped to attention as soon as Dean laid Alex out on the asphalt and they could see how limp she'd gone. Both of them darted over from where they had been lollygagging, their eyes wide with terror. "Oh my God, Jenna squeaked, already sounding like she wanted to cry. But before either of them could do more than come to her side, Dean could call her name to rouse her, Alex awoke as quickly as she had fainted, rolling her head with a grimace as she came back around. She looked up to see the worried faces of most of her favorite people hanging over her. "What happened?" she asked. "You passed out," said Dean, cupping her face with a hand. "Oh," said Alex, and though this had made things clear to her, her tone still sounded confused simply from the disorientation of losing time. "Alex, what's wrong?" Dean pressed her as much as he dared. "I know you said you were feeling off lately, but this is more than off." Alex shook her head, a little irritably. "Nothing's wrong, I don't know," she sighed. "I'm tired is all. I was just finally relaxing after the fight and then finding Matt and then the other fight, and then I was too relaxed." And then her voice broke as she felt everything that had happened in less than 12 hours finally overwhelm her. "It's just been a really rough day. Okay, easy, baby girl." Dean let his tone soften again as his daughter began to sob, and he hauled her back up to cradle her against his chest. It scared him how hard she shook as she cried. He didn't know, but it frightened Alex, too. She had never felt her emotions hit such an intense peak this quickly, and she wasn't sure she could cry hard enough to get out from under the weight of them. And even though she had listed her reasons, she didn't really believe herself that this would elicit this extreme of a reaction. It seemed out of proportion to Dean, as well, but only because he'd seen his daughter go rough so many difficult things with such grace. This break was out of character for her. But if he considered the list, she'd seen him and her uncle and even Castiel cross over on multiple occasions and return. But they'd always known they were coming back, she would know the plan, there would always be a chance. This was the first time her brother had returned from the dead after a decade of believing him lost forever. Then add the stress of having a huge secret found out and her father being absolutely infuriated with her and her uncle, who was for all intents and purposes her second parent. And every inch of it was exhausting. And he felt horribly guilty for piling on. "Okay, Alex," he said quietly to her. She couldn't look at him yet, but she managed to quell her sobs enough to listening. "You're right, it's been a rough day. This was too much, Kay. This was too much. And most of it's my fault, and I am so sorry for that. And all this crap you had to deal with was really tiring, and tired hits you like this sometimes. So we're going to keep heading home, and you can sleep it off in baby, and when we get to the bunker, you can crash in your bed. And until then, I'm gonna cool it with your uncle. It's stressing you out, and you don't need any more stress. We can behave ourselves for a few hours, no problem. Sound like a plan?" Alex nodded against his jacket, tears still streaming down her face. But her breaths were starting to even out and slow down. And Matt watched his little sister in her terrible distress be cared for and reassured by her father. Before the funeral, he had really only met Dean but a few brief times. And though his impression had been positive, Matt's later years had made him wonder if it was the blind optimism and enthusiasm of childhood that made him so desperate for Alex to go back to her biological family. He had started to worry that the people she loved and believed to be good and kind and trustworthy actually weren't in her situation. Ion in her new home had degraded just as he had experienced. But this right now she was 19 years old, a legal adult, and without hesitation Dean still held her and rocked her as she wept. This was what Matt had wanted for her. This was what he worried she'd never get if the Winchesters didn't take her back. And almost 10 years of depression and anxiety and painful wondering about the physical and emotional safety of his sister were erased. She had had all she had needed. And though it was clear she had all the support necessary and more, he couldn't stand by and twiddle his thumbs. It wasn't in his nature. Especially when it came to his little sister. Carefully, quietly, he moved to where Dean and Alex rested, crouched down beside them, and reached out to slip his hand into Alex's. She didn't bother to look who had made contact with her. She knew her father would stop anyone new and dangerous, and this certainly wasn't Jenna's hand, or her Uncle Sam's. She simply adjusted her grip to more easily hold on to her brother. Dean watched the young man closely, because although he trusted Matt, he was still a vampire, and he was hungry. And in the most infinitesimal of changes in expression, Dean could see how hard he fought his urges. Being this close, he could probably smell every platelet of Alex's blood, and holding her hand would allow him to feel every one of her arteries and veins and capillaries pulsing. And yet he had to comfort her. And he took profound control of himself to do so. They spared a glance at each other. Dean gave Matt what was almost a smile, and the smallest of nods. And neither one of them worried about what kind of people they had left Alex with while they were gone. Blank, underscore, blank. Alex sat on the hood of the Impala to rest. Dean's arm about her shoulders to steady her, and Jenna and Matt milled around until Sam returned. Got it? Dean asked, clipped, but in an efficient way rather than an angry one. Yeah, and then some, replied Sam. Good, said Dean, and he came off the car. While he and the girls began rearranging their seating, Sam set down the cooler to open it and snag a blood bag for Matt right away. Matt wandered over slowly, his arms crossed tight. He moved slowly in an attempt to bottle his anxiousness for the blood. For one, he was terribly ashamed of being so thirsty in front of these peep. He had thought so highly of and who he thought would have wanted him dead the instant they saw him turned. He felt he was balancing on a very narrow tightrope and even the most minute of wrong moves would send him to his death. He was not aware this was nowhere near how the Winchesters saw it. But nevertheless he moved slowly. And it didn't make a lick of difference. Sam could clearly see him, shaking with anticipation as he walked over, his arms so tight around him he looked like he was freezing cold. But he simply pulled out a bag and handed it to Matt. Here, he said. Then he demonstrated for him. Just twist this off. It's basically a straw. Matt took the bag carefully, even though his vision pulsed at the smell of blood wafting out of the tube. Then he put his mouth to the opening and sucked. He struggled hard not to react, shutting his eyes in the effort, but also with relief. And his first pull on the bag lasted several seconds as he drained half of it. Slowly, his bloodlust subsided, his muscles unclenching and his heart rate lowering. And when he finally came up for air, he gasped and had to lean over to brace his arms on his knees as he relaxed. Sorry, he said to Sam. It's okay. That was really difficult, Matt admitted. I know, Sam repeated. It's instinct when you're a vampire. It's okay, especially if it's one willingly donated pint of blood. He added the quip. Matt had to laugh. Feeling better? Sam asked him, and Matt nodded. You ready to go? And Matt nodded again. All right, let's go. As they headed toward the car, Dean was talking with Jenna, who was cringing and arguing with him quietly. But I don't want to, she whined. Well, tough, you're going to have to, said Dean, quiet but firm. It's just the best setup, so deal with it. He turned away to head toward the driver's side, Jenna glowering daggers at his back as he departed. Dean didn't notice or care. Instead he gave a quick nod to Sam as he approached. Hey, Alex needs to crash up front. You okay with Jenna in the back with you and Matt? Dean asked them. Sam took a moment to reply, processing the several sudden changes that had been thrown at him in that one sentence. The most shocking shift was that Dean was addressing him at all, and with almost zero vitriol. And it made him nervous. Yeah, that's fine, said Sam, his brow furrowed in concern. Is Alex okay? She's beat, was Dean's almost too simple reply. It's been a hell of a day and she needs to rest. And me wanting to beat the crap out of you isn't helping, so for now, truce. The explanation was perfectly logical and believable. And yet, Sam felt like Dean was omitting something. Like something had happened while he was gone that his elder brother was sweeping under the rug. And although Dean had definitely calmed down outwardly, the younger Winchester got the sense this was Dean's most subtle and most spiteful way of getting back at him, hiding a crucial piece of information about his niece. But Sam had to agree with Dean's earlier statement. This was not the time or place to have it out, especially now that Alex wasn't feeling well. But he still pumped his eyebrows briefly at the gall. Yeah, truce, he agreed. Okay, Dean said, turning away again. They all piled into the Impala in silence, Jenna now begrudgingly situated in the back seat with Sam between her and Matt. Alex leaned into the corner made by the bench and the door to doze. She never quite seemed to relax enough, however, and kept reawakening when even the little bumps in the road jostled her just slightly enough to make her uncomfortable. She got more irritable each time. Why was she so particular about this all of a sudden? She'd slept in this seat 1,000 times, and she was so tired, why couldn't she just all into a coma and not wake up until they hit Kansas? This restlessness was pointless and annoying. And why was the repositioning making her sore? That one odd spot just above her right hip, the one that had twinged during billiards. Had she pulled something? When her fourth reposition made her sigh quietly in frustration. She would have preferred to scream, but there had been too much crap today to add screaming on top of it. But the sigh was still loud enough that her father noticed. Dean reached over with his free hand to pinch her jacket shoulder and give it a little tug. She glanced over at him. But she already knew what he was indicating and wordlessly proceeded to curl up on her side across the bench, her head resting on her father's lap, his arm draped over her shoulder. He could Feel the tension still stored in her body, every muscle of hers that touched him a steel cable. And he knew what to do, but he was very aware of the 3 other passengers in the car, sparing a sheepish glance in the rearview mirror. So he leaned sideways, popped open the glove box and riffled through the tapes therein until he found it. He could tell it was the one because the wording on the SID was barely legible from endless use over the decades. He popped it in the tape deck and found a comfortable but audible volume. The slow, steady rhythm of Hey, Jude hummed out of the speakers. Her eyes still shut, Alex smiled as she listened. She knew the calming effect the song had on her was a conditioned response. She'd heard it since the first time her father rocked her to sleep. Nevertheless, it was always so good to hear it. Whenever she really needed to rest and calm down, whenever she was upset, this was the sound that brought her down off the ledge. Almost. She rolled slightly to look up at her father. Her grin turning wry, and said, "I like it better when you sing it." "Shish," was Dean's gentle, reassured replacement for, "I'm not doing that." But he smiled, too, knowing she was teasing him for having stage fright in front of a crowd of 4. She rolled back down to her resting position, eyes closing once more as her amusement at the exchange took the weight off her heart. Dean gave her shoulder a brief, kindly massage as she settled in. And finally she began to relax. And she didn't wake up until they hit Kansas. "Where the crap am I?" Matt said, staring open-mouthed at the structure before him. "Somewhere safe," was Dean's answer. The 5 of them grabbed their various travel bags, Dean snagging Alex's before she could hoist it in spite of the exasperated, "Come on, really?" look she gave him, and made their way down into the bunker. Matt's wonderment held steady throughout entering, descending the stairs, and standing amidst the crow's nest. He turned on he spot between the table and the sofa and chairs, looking around. "Okay," he said, "this is the coolest place I've gotten to stay in ever. And probably the most comfortable in a long time." Alex wandered over to her adoptive brother, smiling at how much he enjoyed the place, but terribly sad at the thought of what the past decade of his life had been. "Yeah, vampires don't always live in up-to-date accommodations," she said. Matt nodded at her. Then he shrugged, saying, "We don't need to. We don't really get sick, or freeze from the cold, or get heat stroke, or even need electricity. Don't need a fridge or a stove or artificial light. So we just stay wherever we won't be bothered." "We used to stay is what I meant to say," Matt corrected himself, his voice fading and his gaze drifting. "We used to." Alex watched Matt as he started to spiral. His eyes searched the empty space in front of him as he realized how much had suddenly changed. They were all gone. His entire nest. Everyone he had spent the last decade of his life with. Those who had cared for him, helped raise him, who he had cared for in turn at times. And now he stood in the living space of the people who had just killed all of them. They were walking around him, his family's murderers, within feet of him, going about their business like nothing had happened. How could they wipe out all those lives, all those people he loved, and just move on? "I'm sorry," said Alex. He glanced up at her with a quick intake of breath. For a second he had forgotten she was watching him. Why would she bother? He was just another monster to snuff out. He shook his head, half to scatter this impulsive thought, half in response to her. "It's okay," he said. "No, it's not," replied Alex softly. "No, it's not," Matt couldn't stop himself from agreeing. And his tone became sharp. But he sighed at his sudden outburst. I mean, while Sam and Jenna had already departed down the corridors to unpack, Dean had stopped by he table to deposit a few spare items from his bag before taking the rest to his room. He looked up askance at his daughter and her brother as he worked, noting the rise in Matt's voice. He didn't make a move yet, but paid close attention to the conversation. "You were probably really close to them," said Alex. Matt had to nod slowly, carefully. "Yeah, they were my friends, even my family for those 10 years. I mean, it's not like they were perfect, or always kind and courteous. A lot of them were real dicks, honestly. But some of them were. I liked a couple of them a lot." With his last words, he had to look up at Alex and smile at their memory, and tears had filled his eyes. "Annie, the woman, the one you killed before I went after you," and his words sent a knife through Alex's heart, eliciting her own tears to well. And it hurt worse when Matt's voice broke. "She was really sweet." Alex grimaced with grief as she watched her brother cry. "I'm so sorry, Matt. How can you do that?" He gasped, incredulous. "How can you do this? Just going around, killing monsters, without even knowing what they're like. I mean, I get it with ghosts and stuff, they can't control what they are or what they do. But what about those of us who aren't just straight up fucking cruel? And if there's no judge or jury, then why spare me? Why am I any better than Annie? Why do I get to live? Just because you know me? Yes, because we know you, Dean interjected, pacing over from the table. Better yet, because we failed you. It's our fault, it's my fault that you were stuck in that nest for a decade. And I'm going to fix that. How are you going to fix that? Asked Matt, shaking his head. You can't travel back in time. No, Dean agreed, then corrected himself, well, yes, sometimes it's been a while. But that's not what I'm talking about. He ignored Matt's sudden look of shock at this side comment. The plan is to find a way to clean up the mess. Leaving his curiosity behind and returning to his hopeless state, Matt shook his head and asked, how could you possibly do that? I'm already a vampire. I've killed people. Dean looked him over carefully. It starts with a comfortable bed. He walked over to the coffee table where Jenna had abandoned the cooler, uncertain of where to take a box full of bagged blood, and snatched it up and brought it over to Matt. Here, in case you get hungry anytime soon. Alex, I think there's a room made up down by the archives, if you want to get your brother settled in. "'Kay," said Alex. Alex turned and led Matt toward the corridors, both silent and solemn and slow. But Alex had one last thing to say. You've killed people? She asked quietly as they walked. "Two," he said. Alex nodded. Well, I've killed a bunch of monsters, so I'm not going to judge. She said. Matt spared a soft look over at his sister as they exited the crow's nest, feeling so much warmth and acceptance from her in the midst of their mutual wrongdoing. Dean went back to his and Alex's bags by the table and hoisted them. Right as he turned to go unpack the rest in his room, Sam and Jenna came back from the passages. Hey, Sam acknowledged the elder Winchester. Where did Alex and Matt go? Alex is showing Matt to his new digs, replied Dean. Sam's eyebrows rose. Alone, and then Dean settled a venomous stare on his brother. And the truce was over. Oh, so you have better judgment than I do regarding my daughter's safety, do you? Asked Dean menacingly, and although Sam understood where Dean was coming from and still felt guilt around the whole mess of events, the accusatory comment still turned him sour, and his jaw set as he looked away. Jenna felt the tension building in the room and decided to opt out of the situation. I'll go see how they're doing, she said with a shaky, meek kind of brightness, and moved back toward the halls. Yeah, me, too, said Sam, and made to follow the young woman. Dean looked away and dropped the duffels again. No, Sam, you stay, he said, almost resigned, but with such intense finality that Sam knew this was it. As Jenna booked it down the hall as discreetly as she could speed walk, which was astoundingly fast. Sam slowly turned back to face the music. Look, I don't know how many times I can say I'm sorry. I don't care that you're sorry, Sam. Dean was still quiet, but the vitriol in his words was palpable. I care that you did any of it in the first place. We didn't want you to worry, said Sam. No, Dean bit back. You didn't want me to chew your ass out for doing what I didn't want you to do at all. You drugged me and took off on a hunt with my daughter. That was when Sam finally blew a gasket. I shouldn't have had to drug you. So what, I took her on a hunt by myself. Big deal. By that time, you'd taken her on hunts by yourself, hunts more dangerous than Louisiana was supposed to be, and you never balked at that. She's safe with me, too, Dean. No, she's obviously not. Dean shouted back. Look what happened. Yeah, she's fine, Sam scolded. But she wasn't, Dean retorted. What I was afraid would happen was exactly what happened. She nearly died, and I wasn't there to save her. I wasn't even given the option to be there. And that's what really pisses me off. The deception. That entire hunt was done behind my back. All of it. You couldn't even ask my permission. Sam gaped. Are you kidding? Permission? I need your permission to take Alex on a hunt. Yes, generally, when you take a 16-year-old into a life-threatening situation, you get the parents' permission first. Dean bellowed. I'm practically her parent, too, shouted Sam. You're her uncle. What difference does that make? Except for 6 months of her life, I raised her right along with you. That doesn't mean you get to go off and do God knows what with her without even talking to me. I did talk to you. I did talk to you. And then to lie, bald-faced lies, about her coming seconds away from death. You wouldn't listen to me. You couldn't even accept the fact that she could possibly be safe with me. The amount of secrecy. This was a huge thing to keep from me. I thought we had put you having zero faith in me behind us decades ago. Enough. Enough with that bullshit, Sam. Dean finally put a halt to the back and forth. This has nothing to do with your friggin' ego. We should both know by now that no matter how good we are at our job, shit hits the fan at some point, and any chance we get to have backup, we should. How many times would you or I have died on a hunt without the other there, huh? How many times, Sam? We need backup and you know it. But you ignored that. You played fast and loose with that rule and it compromised the safety of my child. And then you lied about it. So here's a new rule. If you ever learn of absolutely anything about my daughter's health and well-being, you tell me immediately. Sam heard his brother's words and could logically see this made perfect sense and was an extremely reasonable request given the circumstances. But the way Dean said it sounded like a demand. And a threat. So Sam continued to fume. He growled, "Or what?" And Dean said matter-of-factly, "Are you and I are done." Sam's expression of near hatred instantly morphed to shock, his mouth dropping open. "We're done," Sam reiterated, his brows lifting in disbelief. "Listen, Sam, you're my brother, and you know how much I care about you. We've literally been to hell and back together for each other, even," said Dean. "But if Yona's going to be more important to me than you, it's Alex. So if you can't be honest with me about the big stuff in her life, well, that's the end of our story." "Dean," Sam said breathlessly. "Do you know, Sam?" Dean cut him off, but his tone was no longer harsh. "Do you know that just a few nights before you went on that hunt, I dreamt that Alex and I were on a hunt alone ourselves, and some pagan god slit her throat and she bleed out as I held her. I felt the life drain from her body like it was real, I saw the light go out of my daughter's eyes. And that's almost exactly what happened down in Louisiana. What I feared the most, so much so that I dreamt it became reality, and I didn't even know about it until right now." Sam suddenly remembered, in upsettingly vivid detail, kneeling over his niece. Seeing the shard of glass in her throat and the terror in her eyes as she gaped like a fish out of water, too much blood running relentlessly down her neck, and the overwhelming feeling of desperation and helplessness. "I didn't get to be there for her," Dean continued. "You kept me from being there to prevent that from happening, or help save her from her injury, or then just comfort her while she was dying. And maybe you don't remember as well as I do, but you were the one who said, 'What if she needs you?' That's what you said to me the day I almost let go and died for the last time. And that's why I'm still here, Sam. That's why I'm still walking the earth. So I can be there for her. Even if it's after all is said and done. So the next time something happy NS to that piece of my heart that's walking around outside of my body, and you know about it and I don't," Dean implored his brother, and Sam was startled to hear Dean's voice wobble and see his eyes start to shine. "You tell me." Okay. While Sam had understood why Dean was so angry this entire time, he hadn't really acknowledged it. He had been concentrating on the fallout, and then wound up by the malevolence directed at him. But the reason Sam had hidden Alex's close call in the first place was exactly why Dean was so furious, his fear of losing his daughter. And seeing that fear in Dean's expression reminded Sam it wasn't hatred or spite or vindictiveness that was driving the elder's reaction. And all the guilty he had felt initially welled up again. "Yeah, okay," Sam agreed, his voice soft. "I will. I'm sorry." Dean tipped his head down and pointed a finger at the younger Winchester. "Now that one you meant, didn't you?" Sam gave a breath of a laugh and a flash of a grin before he nodded slightly. Dean let loose a tiny smile of his own. "Look, I'm still pretty pissed about this," he said calmly. "You're going to have to let me cool off. And you probably won't live it down for a while. But just give me some time and some space." Sam sighed. "Understood. Good," said Dean. Then he grabbed his and Alex's bags from where he had dropped them. "I'm going to go unpack." The the Winchesters had to offer at the spur of the moment was simple and sparse, but cozy. There was only a bed made, but not recently, a side table, a set of dresser drawers, and a closet. Altaug. The lighting was bright enough to see by clearly, it was still warm. A very thin layer of dust coated all of it. Obviously they had not been expecting company. Alex walked over to the bed and fluffed the pillow a bit. Coughing slightly at the small cloud the action roused. "Sorry," she said. "It's a little dusty. None of us have been in here in a while." "Alex," Matt quipped, "you just liberated me from an abandoned flour mill. It doesn't get dustier than that." Alex had to snicker a little at his comment. "Yeah, well," she shrugged, "you deserve better." "You all keep saying that," he said. "I don't know where you get such bizarre ideas." "How about from my childhood?" Alex said it jokingly, but in the moments that followed, she realized she meant it sincerely. Matt noticed and nodded, but what he said was, "I've changed." "So have I," Alex replied simply, sitting down on the foot of the bed. Matt gave a small snort of laughter. Not really, though, Alex smiled in response. Yeah, you neither. Matt smiled back. Then he walked over to the dresser, removing his jacket and laying it on the top. I don't know, he continued. I don't think it's the memory of me so much as the guilt. The guilt? Alex prompted. Yeah, the guilt you and your dad and your uncle feel, said Matt. For leaving me, which is silly. It's silly to feel guilty about abandoning you. Alex asked, almost taken aback. Yup, said Matt straightforwardly. You can't leave something that's already gone. Why would you feel guilty about not looking for me if I wasn't there? Because you were there, Alex came back. Not that you knew of, was Matt's response. Seriously, Alex, an angel told your dad I was dead. Well, implied, I guess. After that, why would any of you have any reason to believe I was still out there? Alex sighed. Yeah, I still kind of want to beat the crap out of Saws for that. Matt gave a tiny laugh again. Can you beat up an angel? Alex shrugged. I don't recommend it. It's kind of like hitting a bronze statue. Wait, you've actually beat up an angel? Matt revived his disbelief from his first encounter with Castiel. Oh, yeah, said Alex. I had a beef with him a time or two when I was a kid. And honestly, if you punch him in the middle, there's a little bit of squish, but it doesn't do anything. But most importantly, you don't want to hit him in the face. At all, ever. Matt shook his head, chuckling incredulously. Man, what is it our lives have become? How did we even get here? I was born into it, said Alex solemnly. I was always in it, and I would never get away from it. Slowly she looked over at her brother. And we Winchesters always drag those we love down with us. Matt gave a bitter smile and meandered over from the dresser to the bed. Trust me, he said. What happened to me that couldn't possibly have had anything to do with you? He collapsed onto one side of the bed and heaved a huge sigh of relief. He shut his eyes, relishing in the softness of the mattress and the cushion of the blanket atop it. Holy crap, he said. I don't remember the last time I laid on something this soft. Alex crawled up from her seat at the end of he bed and laid down opposite her brother, turned to face him. Matt, she asked, her voice very soft and rather sad. What happened? Matt searched her eyes for a long time. He could tell she honestly wanted the truth. She could tell it was going to be a very hard story for him to share, especially if he told it as honestly as he would to his little sister. But if he was going to open up to Anion, in the world about any of it, about all of it, it would be to her. And he knew it would hurt her to hear it. And that she would listen anyway. He swallowed hard and began. Well, Aunt Nance, she was pretty stressed after taking me in. He said. She was already kind of overwhelmed with our cousins, and yet another kid was too much. Too much time and responsibility and coordinating and money. And then she met this guy. Alex gave a slow, long intake of breath, her brow furrowing as she nestled in to listen to what she guessed was coming. He was charming and he had money, Matt continued. He started to help out financially, a bill here, some groceries there, and then Aunt Nancy was able to cut back hours at work and spend more time taking care of us in the house. But then she was also taking care of her boyfriend, too. And he never really liked me. Probably because I didn't really like him. I couldn't tell you why I didn't like him, I just didn't. Something about some of the comments he made about Aunt Nance or the cousins. And I never actually said I didn't like him or was rude or anything, but I guess I couldn't keep my face from saying shit. And I suppose he could see that. Once in a while he'd look at me like I had caught him doing something bad, even when he wasn't at the time, and it made him mad. Like I saw through his charm, and he hated that. I don't know. One day around Thanksgiving he and Aunt Nancy got into a fight. And he kind of shoved her. And that made me mad. So I shoved him. You shoved him? Alex asked, unable to keep a note of lightly amused disbelief out of her tone. I shoved him, Matt confirmed. Matt, I've never seen you shove anyone ever, said Alex. Well, I was inching up on puberty, Matt shrugged. Way more testosterone in me at the time than I knew what to do with. You got to see the last bit of nice in me. He gave her a playful, backhanded tap on the shoulder. Oh, come on, she growled in reply. There's plenty of nice still in you, I know it. Quote, Matt shrugged a little, almost as if he didn't believe her. Well, anyway, he went back to his story. He shoved her, I shoved him, and he punched me. Oh my God, Alex closed her eyes, too tired to be angry. Weren't you like 12? Yeah, said Matt, I went down easy. He practically laughed. It's not funny, Alex had to say quietly. No, it's not, said Matt. even though he was still smiling a little. And he didn't just punch me, he came after me on the ground a little, too. And that's when Aunt Nancy got involved, trying to pull him off me before he could actually do any damage. Which, of course, he shook her off violently, and that's when she flew into the plates, which broke and cut her arm. Real bad. That's awful, said Alex. And I know that sounds dumb coming from me because I've been in fights a billion times worse on the regular, but when you're a kid. It was scary, Matt agreed. But honestly, that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was when he yelled at me afterward. Because he saw Nancy had gotten cut up, and he turned on me and said it was my fault. That I shouldn't have pushed him and escalated the fight, and Matt paused. Looking into empty space, and Alex got the sense that his next words were a direct quote, was just a burden and a nuisance, and I was the reason Aunt Nance was so stressed. That she had argued with him in the first place. Matt, that she was better off without me. What a piece of shit, Alex said, her voice high as her tears welled. He was right. What? He was right, said Matt simply. I had seen it. I knew what it was the whole time. I could see how much of a strain it put on her to be looking after a fourth kid and working at the same time. I saw it long before she got in with this guy. And I knew that's why she started dating him. It was my fault. It was all my fault. So I got up and ran out the door. Alex watched him, shocked, her mouth hanging open. Matt, however, seemed unperturbed. To him the subject was as plain and unremarkable as the ceiling at which he stared. I wasn't her problem anymore, he said calmly. She didn't have to take you in, Matt, Alex finally bit off. She was obligated, Matt tried to argue reasonably, but his sister cut him off. I don't fucking care, she said. She didn't have to take you in. She chose to look after you. She could have said that 4 friggin' kids was too much for her to handle, and she didn't. She took you in. That stress was her responsibility, not yours. And if that's not your responsibility, then that jackass she was dating sure as shit wasn't yours either. Matt turned his head to look at his sister, and she could see in his expression that her words meant a lot to him, even if he still felt doubt. Well, he began, I don't know if that's true, but it is, Alex snapped at him. Either way, Matt insisted calmly, thanks for saying that. Alex nodded, angrily wiping away a tear. So what happened after that? She asked. 'Cause at this point, still not a vampire. Matt had to smile a little bit again. Well, when I ran to the park, he continued. I found my favorite slide, you know. The kind made of sheet metal and lead pipe, the fastest one. His aside brought a watery laugh from Alex, and I sat underneath it, holding onto the ladder, crying, and then he was there. Marcus. Alex filled in the blank. Marcus, Matt confirmed. And he asked me what was wrong, and I told him. And I said I was a burden, that I sucked the life out of Aunt Nancy like I was a vampire. Woo, said Alex. Isn't that ironic? Matt nodded agreement. Seriously, though, what he said to that was he lived in a place where I could always be of service to a bunch of people. I just had to get up and go with him. Leave it all behind, leave Aunt Nancy behind so she could be less overworked, leave behind my old life, so I could go someplace where I would always have something to offer and never be a burden to anyone. What did they have you do as a kid vampire in their nest? Alex asked. I wasn't a vampire for a long time, said Matt. What? I was the snack, said Matt. Alex almost gasped. Oh, I wasn't a drain on resources or energy anymore, he said. I was the resource. I was their energy. For several months. I'm so sorry, Alex whispered. It was scary at first, Matt shrugged. But I got used to it. What was even more scary was when they brought in a new snack. 'Cause I don't know if you remember, but I was kind of a skinny kid. I didn't hold a whole lot of blood for a nest of what was 6 vampires at the time. And all of a sudden, I thought my usefulness had run out. My whole reason for being there. But when I saw the newcomer I got nervous and asked Marcus, what about me? He said I wasn't enough food, but that was okay. If I can't give the blood, why not take it? Become one of them. And I didn't want to get dumped out and my ass in the middle of nowhere, so Marcus turned me. And it's been life in the wind ever since. For 10 years. For 10 years. And it wasn't all that bad, really, said Matt. Having to hide drink blood and on the worst days kill. It wasn't the best way to live life, but I wasn't very afraid of what would happen if I had to go off on my own. It's easy to survive on nothing if you're a vampire. So it wouldn't have been as big of a thing to get kicked out of my nest than if I were just some human kid hanging out with whoever the state put me with. And the nests can get pretty tight, even if there's really intense drama. So once I was in, there wasn't a whole lot of chance I would get booted. And some of them were pretty decent. But there were days when it felt very lonely and very cold, and there really isn't more to life than just surviving, and there's really no one else except your nest. Sometimes I just missed school. Alex watched Matt inspect the sea, Eiling, and could see in his eyes the chill he was remembering. She struggled to imagine what it had felt like, partly because she didn't want to. She knew what it was to have a somewhat insular life, to have secrets and a small family and live in a place cut off from a lot of other people, but at least she had still gone to school. Even when she was in an online high school, she still interacted with her teachers and classmates every day. She hadn't been an active, involved local community member, but she hadn't been an outcast. What she said to Matt was, "I'm glad you're here now." "Me, too," said Matt, looking over at his sister and smiling. They stretched the distance between them to embrace. Feeling the warmth and solidity of each other's arms and backs, and hearing the sound of their breaths, made it all the more tangible. All the more real, that they were both alive and truly, undeniably here. And it was terribly comforting to have each other back. Then Matt broke in, "You smell weird." "Shut up," Alex scolded, laughing as she shoved her brother playfully off her. "You smell." Matt had to laugh, too, but more at the miscommunication. No, he chuckled. "That's not what I meant. It's not a bad smell. It's just weird. And it's not something you can smell, it's a vampire-level scent." "Oh," Alex replied, scrunching up her face with a touch of concern. "That is weird." "Yeah," said Matt, "and I've smelled it before. But I can't remember where or what it is. I don't remember it being a bad thing, but I don't know. It's weird." "Huh," said Alex. "Well, I have been feeling off these past few days. Maybe I do have a cold or something." "Yeah, maybe," said Matt lightly, but he looked concerned, like he didn't really believe his or Alex's explanation. "Hey, guys," came a whisper from the door of the bedroom. Alex and Matt lifted their heads to see Jenna peering around the corner of the frame, hands clutching the wood. "Can I hide in here for a minute?" she continued. "Sure," replied Alex. "Why?" Jenna wasted no time speed walking to the bed and climbing on. "Ooh, they've started fighting," she said, her voice wobbling with anxiety. With zero prompting, she curled up directly behind Alex, spooning her tightly just to feel safe. Alex snorted, but offered no resistance. After the last week, she was perfectly content to lay in a pile on the bed with her closest friend and her long-lost brother. The love and peace she felt with them almost completely cancelled out the sound of her father's and uncle's raised voices echoing down the halls and the dulla che that had settled in above her right hip. Almost. There came a point in the evening when the bunker finally fell quiet. Sam and Dean had stopped fighting, and without any signs of storming off or coming to blows. That was when Jenna deemed it safe to venture out, leaving Matt to settle in and Alex to crash in her room for a nap before dinner. The young woman found the crow's nest empty but for Sam, who was reclining on the couch. Looking exhausted, she dared to approach him, carefully as she came up in his blind spot. "Hey," she said lightly. Sam gave an intake of breath as he looked toward Jenna over the back of the sofa. "Hey," he greeted her. "Is everything okay?" she dared to ask. "Oh, yeah," Sam sighed. "We're fine. We've had blowouts like this before, and worse. I mean, this was pretty bad, but yeah. We've definitely had worse." "So, he was super angry," commented Jenna. "I've never seen him that angry. I mean, I've seen him angry, like, whoa dude, chill, what's the big deal, but not, like livid." "He was livid." Quote. Sam gave a tired laugh. "He can be that way sometimes." "Well, I hope, sometimes, isn't often," said Jenna. "Just a little terrifying." "Don't worry about it, Jenna," said Sam. "He's only that angry when he's scared. And usually he's scared because he cares. So the more he cares, the angrier he gets." "I guess I can see how that logics," said Jenna. "Still I think he needs, like, a cheeseburger or something to calm down." With that, she half rolled, half vaulted over the back of the couch to sit balled up opposite Sam. "That's actually not a bad idea," Sam said, scrubbing his face with his hands. "Hell, I could use a cheeseburger after the last few days." "Samesies," said Jenna. "Maybe I'll make some tonight," said Sam. "Call it a peace offering." Jenna tittered at Sam's almost jest. Just then, Dean returned to the crow's nest from unpacking. Sam caught sight of him and called his brother's attention to the idea. "Hey," he said, "Jenna and I were thinking comfort food for dinner. You in?" Dean tilted his head in acknowledgement. "I'll never say no to that." "'Kay," said Sam, standing. "I'll get some burgers going." "Ooh, burgers. Hey, add D bacon and you'll go from 75% forgiven to 90. Dean called after him, making the younger sniff a weary laugh. Sam now departed for the kitchen. Jenna turned around on the sofa to talk with the other brother. "We figured you'd like that after you know." Dean looked at her from under his eyebrows as he rubbed the back of his skull. "What, me kickin' Sam in the ass for being a dick?" "Yeah, a little grease sounds good after that." Jenna attempted a laugh, starting to relax. He seemed a lot more amicable now he and Sam had hashed things out. "He says you two are doing okay," she said. Then she put on a goofy tone. "I mean, a whole 75% already. 90 with bacon," Dean amended. "A reasonable negotiation," agreed Jenna. Dean chuckled. "Yeah, we're good," he sighed. "I'm still pissed at him. But we're good. Nevertheless, those burgers will take a minute. I need a drink to tide me over." He turned and headed toward the table where the whiskey sat in its men of letters decanter. "Oh, man, me, too," said Jenna, bouncing off the couch and following him. "This has all been Sue Streese." Suddenly Dean rounded on her. "Okay, that's it. You're cut off." Jenna stopped several feet away. Her jaw dropping, she had unwittingly stumbled on his still shortened fuse. She scoffed and squeaked, "What? Why?" "Because your drinking is getting out of hand, and I've had it," snapped Dean. "Out of hand," Jenna repeated indignantly. "Yeah," retorted Dean, "it's out of hand, and as long as you're my responsibility, you're not getting another drop." It was. Then Jenna discovered the shortness of her own fuse. "I'm not your responsibility," she came back. "You're not my father, although you sure as shit are acting like him lately." "Oh, you're going to compare me to that piece of crap?" Dean's tone went quiet and menacing. "You know what?" "Yeah," Jenna bit back. Apparently, she had squirreled away a lot of anger over the last few days, and her emotional bottle had hit max capacity. "Yeah, I am. You're being super controlling for no good reason, just like him. He wouldn't let me have any fun either. Is it fun to wake up in a hotel room you don't recognize with someone you don't know laying next to you?" Dean shouted. "Or to get ambulance to a hospital to have your stomach pumped? Or pick a stupid fight with a stranger for no good reason and get beaten half to death? Does that sound like fun to you? Because if you keep going the way you're going, Jenna, that's what's going to happen." Listening to Dean's tirade had made Jenna's lip quiver, but more than that. It made her resentment bubble to the surface. "So what if that happens to me?" she shouted. "Who cares? I care," Dean yelled at her. His words hit Jenna hard enough they made her gasp and recoil. Suddenly she flashed to her brief conversation with Sam. The more he cares, the angrier he gets, but she hadn't expected that to apply to Dean's quarrel with her. Unaware of the gears working overtime in Jenna's head, Dean pressed on. "Your best friend cares. Sam cares. Hell, Saz cares," shouted Dean. "Don't you?" Jenna's tears were welling, unhindered now that her anger and bitterness had dissolved. And she wrapped her arms tight about herself as she considered her answer. She couldn't look at Dean when she decided to be honest and said in a small, high-pitched tone, "No." Dean's liquid green eyes continued to search her face for the few silent moments that followed Jenna's response. Then he shook his head dejectedly and looked away. "Well, that scares me more than the drinking," he mumbled as he leaned back against the table. He took a minute to sigh and cross his arms and ankles, running a hand over his face. Jenna stood quietly, trying not to cry and failing miserably. Finally Dean spoke, and his voice was soft. "Okay, listen to me," he began. "I just found out that my daughter had her throat slit 3 years ago, and that her brother got turned into a vampire 10 years ago. And now you're trying to, I don't know, friggin' kill yourself with bad choices. I basically went from having 1 kid to 3 in the blink of an eye, and it's a lot. I'm in way over my head. And I don't know how to worry about all of you at once. So you'll have to forgive me if I lose my cool now and again." Jenna just nodded, still unable to make eye contact. She gave a SNIFF and quickly wiped at her face with her shirt sleeve. Dean watched her sadly, and the thought of all she'd been through and all she was still dealing with in the background worked to overwhelm him. "Jenna," he said gently, "alcohol's not gonna do jack to help you." Jenna finally dared to look up as she listened. "Sure, once in a while, it'll numb the pain, but if you're always numbing the pain and not dealing with it, then the problem never goes away. Then you're just living in oblivion. And I know sometimes that sounds like a good thing," and he had to smile and almost laugh a little before his somberness returned. "But it's not, because then you won't get a chance to change all the bad. It just stays bad. You can't fix anything with alcohol. Believe me, I have tried. And for a moment, she saw in Dean's face and in his voice all the suffering he'd endured, even though she had no idea what any of it was. It's okay to dull the ache a little bit on a really crappy day, but it can't become a habit, Dean continued. This enthusiasm, this eagerness you've developed, it worries me because even if it seems like it's going to be a good time, eventually it's just going to go south, Jenna. Way south. So just tap the brakes for me, will ya? Jenna nodded. "'Kay, good," Dean sighed. "What?" Jenna asked before the conversation could end. "What actually helps?" "If dulling the che doesn't do anything, what actually helps?" "What helps you?" Dean took a long, slow breath before answering. "Well, if I'm going to be 100% honest, I've gotta say talking to my brother." "Really?" And while Jenna meant to say it genuinely, she couldn't help a touch of humor edging its way into her tone. "I know, he and I will really have it out once in a while," Dean agreed. "And I tell ya, I fight the talking every time. Every time. I always think I can deal with whatever's going on my own. But eventually, he worms it out of me and it helps. And he'll do the exact same thing. Ask him, he'll admit it. He'll sit and stew on crap just like I do, and sooner or later I'll wring his feelings out of him and it helps. So I don't know who that person is for you, I'm guessing my daughter." Dean gave a weary smile, and Jenna responded in kind, "But when you get the chance, when you feel like you can handle it, just talk it out." "'Kay." Jenna nodded again, and wiped the rest of her tears off her cheeks. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," she replied. "Good," he said, coming off the table and walking toward her. "Bring it in." Jenna relented and traversed the few steps to lean into Dean's open arms. "I'm sorry I yelled," he said. "It's okay," she replied into the fabric of his shirt. "Not exactly the easiest way to get where we needed to go, but it got us there," he added. Before Jenna could stop herself, she said, "You're not like my dad." "Thank God," said Dean, almost laughing. "Yeah, had me worried for a second." "He didn't care," Jenna continued unabated. "He just thought it made him look bad if I did stupid stuff. Wasn't worried about what it did to me. Same with my mom. I guess I finally got away from that crap." "Well, good riddance," said Dean. Then he gave her head a careful, calming stroke. "Hey, you're going to be okay, little miss." Jenna tightened her grip on Dean just a little, and in turn her past loosened its grip on her. The God's honest truth was that the bacon on the burgers brought Sam up to 92% forgiven. And Dean wasn't the only one satiated by the meal. Alex devoured her burger with eerily similar table manners to her father. As if she had been desperately deficient in whatever nutrients the patty contained. Jenna's enthusiasm for food, though typically dormant and less tempted, made a spectacular appearance. Even Sam was content to clog his arteries just a little, and while Matt was uncertain at first, he happily joined in. "Goddamn," said Alex as she collapsed in her chair. "I knew I was tired, but I didn't realize I needed that just as much as the nap." Dean chuckled. "Yeah, not bad, Sammy," he agreed, leaning back as well. "I don't really remember the last time I had a hot burger," Matt dared to comment. "Thanks, Sam." Sam gave a small, kind smile to the young man's honesty. "Hey, no problem," he said. "I know most nests don't do a lot of cooking or eating out." Matt laughed a little and shook his head meaningfully. No, they don't. Most nest. Well, there's a few rich ones here and there," said Dean. "Pretty few and far between. Where was that one?" "Ooh." Sam thought for a moment. "I want to say New Hampshire." "Sounds about right," mumbled Dean. "Hunters don't come across the hoity-toity ones as often because they usually fly under the radar. You know, the money gives them the ability to get blood by covert means. Or paying people off to get drained or keep their mouths shut, or they know a guy who knows a guy. It's all pretty twisted. More twisted than a regular nest." Matt had to jest. Dean tilted his head in acknowledgement. Twisted in a different way." "Well, we weren't twisted like that," Matt said, almost amused. "It actually was kind of nice sometimes." "Really?" asked Sam, and while his tone was a little disbelieving, he also sounded genuinely interested. "Yeah," Matt said. "I mean, you spend that much time with 6, 7, 8 people, you really get to know them and rely on them." "The nest is your family," said Dean. "Yeah," replied Matt, starting to look surprised. "You know, you all kind of act like you know what it's like in a nest." "You thought we wouldn't?" asked Dean. "I mean, no," Matt shrugged. "Why would you? We don't just go around hacking and shooting at anything that looks like a monster," said Dean. It's true, Sam insisted at Matt's doubtful look. We have to learn about who or what we're hunting and why. Their behaviors and motives. Otherwise we'd never know what weapon to bring with us, or what kind of mess we're walking into, Dean added on. Or if there's a way to save someone instead of just offing them. Exactly, said Sam. Like with demons, we don't knife everyone we meet. We exorcise them if we can, so their meat suit gets to be a person again. Now don't get us wrong, you can be a good hunter just by being a good fighter, but you're not going to last very long, said Dean. If you want to hunt for longer than a day or a year, if you're lucky, you have to be smart, too. So yeah, we understand the social dynamics of a nest, he concluded. You say you bonded with your nest mates. We know you mean it. But we also know that what you're not sayin' is how some of those vamps you lived with were big stinkin' piles of crap, too. Matt ran through his emotions as he listened, interested as the brothers explained the nuances of hunting, surprised at the level of discernment it took, heartened by their understanding of the deep connection he'd had with his fellow vampires, amused by the accuracy and unabashed honesty regarding the less savory of his nestmates, and then a little disgruntled by it. Yeah, Matt said, you've got me there. None of it was a walk in the park. Except the literal walks in the park. He was glad he elicited a murmur of laughter from the Winchesters and Jenna. Really, there are a lot of things that made it bearable, a lot of reasons I used to make staying feel okay. But there were a lot of things, too, that made it really, really crappy. I could spend whatever amount of time trying to spin it, but if I'm actually going to tell the truth, and I don't think you'll be surprised, Matt said haltingly, I really wish I wasn't a vampire. They all sat quietly in the wake of his words. Of course, the first to make any response was Alex, reaching out to grip the top of her brother's hand. I wish there was a way to undo it for you, she said. Me, too, said Jenna. Out of all of us, I probably know you the least, but so far you seem like super nice. I'd help if I could. Dean assessed the three youngsters closely as they made their wistful pledges of support. Would you really? He finally asked Jenna. Jenna turned her attention to him, a little surprised, and shrugged with a goofy scoff. I mean, yeah, of course. And you? He asked Alex. You really have to ask. Alex gave her father a wry smile as she picked up her water glass. He gave her the shadow of a smile back. And you? Dean finally asked Matt. If we found a way to turn you back, would you take that chance? Because I don't know if something like that exists, but if it does. The one thing I do know is that it won't be easy. Matt's expression was serious, in spite of how hard he found it to imagine getting the opportunity to become human again. If I actually had the chance, yeah, I'd go for it. No question. Dean nodded slowly. Sam didn't speak, feeling it best to sit back and observe the conversation. But his face betrayed the concern he was trying to keep under wraps. Because he knew what Dean was planning, and he knew it could very easily provide far too much false hope for far too long. Or worse, backfire. And he knew Dean would go for it whole hog anyway. And he did. Given Alex, Jenna, and Matt's responses, Dean made the decision, saying, well, all right, then. Blank, blank. An ancient tome of a book banged down on the table. It didn't have to fall but a few inches to rattle the highly finished oak surface. The name of the game is, Dean said as he rounded the table the next morning, depositing reading M. Material from the Men of Letters collection as he went, Can You Cure a Vampire Post-First Blood Meal? Matt stared at his given book in bewilderment. Even though he was a thing of the supernatural, he didn't often find himself faced with an environment where the supernatural proliferated. His other nestmates, sure, but beyond that, the hovels they lived in and the people they hunted and the two WNS they haunted were all as commonplace and everyday as his life before being turned. Now he sat in a windowless bunker, the walls etched with sigils, and the oldest book, perhaps the oldest thing he had ever seen, lying before him, resting on a table that was likely constructed well before his birth. His sister, on the other hand, seemed completely unperturbed. By the time he tore his eyes away from his own ancient manuscript, Alex had already opened her book and was perusing the title page while her father finished his instruction. Their early childhood had been Matt's yardstick for determining normalcy. Apparently this outlandish reality had become Alex's. Beyond his sister, Jenna just sighed. This looked a lot like homework to her. Hadn't they just started summer break? Now, Dean was saying, what you're probably not going to find is a recipe. If there were one, some hunter or man of letters would have noticed it by now. So you're going to have to read between the lines. Oh, God, even more reading than this. Jenna commented under her breath, inspecting the thickness of her volume and lamenting the idea that there were yet more words between the plethora of words already printed. Yeah, it's a bitch, Dean sighed. While she hadn't meant to be heard, Jenna still felt heartened to have Dean agree with her, even empathize, in spite of her complaining. She smiled a little. Hopped in to reassure the young woman, if Dean can buckle down and do it, so can you. What are you trying to say, Sam? Dean asked, slowly bringing his gaze over to his little brother. Sam stayed calm, knowing now was the time to roll with the aftershocks. That research has never been your favorite thing, he amended, but you do it anyway. Dean nodded, satisfied with Sam's diplomacy, and turned back to the kids. That's right, I do it anyway, because we have to. It's a part of the job. An important part of the job. Whether we're hitting the pavement talking to witnesses and family, or sitting here on our asses. Going cross-eyed from reading all damn day. And we don't have any witnesses or family to talk to, so here we sit on our asses. Dean pulled out his own chair and took a seat. All right, he finished up. Look for any mention of vampires, bloodsuckers, or bats, and any metaphors that go with them. If you think you got something, share it with the class. He popped open his laptop to cross-reference as he went. Let's do some digging. There was almost an inaudible, collective intake of breath as the five of them opened their books and began filtering through the antiquated literature. But something poked at the back of Alex's mind. She had smiled at what her uncle had said, but upon review it didn't really align with her experience. Research has never been your favorite thing? She asked her father. Yeah, replied Dean, glancing at her over his reading glasses. Why, I mean, you're always here in the library, reading, Alex said, quirking a smile. Dean paused and looked away. Like I said, he finally answered her, important part of the job. His behavior and reply still struck her a little funny. She had no idea why it did, though, so she brushed it aside. The part of her that trusted her father with her life made up the excuse that it was always good to refresh one's knowledge when possible. Especially when a hunter might not have their bow oaks at the ready in a fight with a ghoul or a werewolf. So she turned back to her book. She spared a glance at her uncle as she did so. He was staring down at his own text, but his eyes weren't moving. And he looked sad. But when he sensed her gaze on him, he peered up at his niece and gave her a warm smile, as if to confirm Dean's explanation. And the part of her that trusted her uncle with her life let her take his gesture at face value. The end.